Okay. All right, we're live and we're on Ben's channel. The title is Beta Quadra Hangout. So we have Ben, who looks like he's kind of in the corner right there, but I'm sure you're all familiar with him. Then you have Jonathan, the expert of all subjects right there. He's going to quite find that amusing there. And then we have Santa, and she is visiting and joining us today. And then there's me, Chad, hanging out. So we're going to talk about, I guess, first the quadras and kind of what organized this group. So Ben, do you have any questions before we get started?
What do you think are the myths of the beta quadra, say in Socionics, that you think are not true?
Well, I think the biggest one that I've been obviously cognizant of was the fact that it's the misunderstanding of force. It's when you think about what I've learned, and it depends on the model, of course, but what I've learned specifically is that when people are looking at force, they imagine someone who has high force to be someone who just gets in bar fights and starts squabbles with everybody for no reason. And I think that's a big myth. I don't think there's that. That is culturally dependent and socially dependent more than environmentally dependent than it is, say, psychotype. And I think that's the biggest part is like, how are you raised? What are your core values? What are the things that you believe in? Because if you do have a high aspect of force, what's going to happen is that you naturally understand the other side of it, which is when to use it, when not to, and how much to apply. And versus, look, I can disarm somebody with my words and kind of calm them down in a sense because I can use the right amount of social pressure to get somebody to do something, but I don't need to punch them in the face because there's a fly on their nose. And that's what what I've been seeing. The problem is if somebody doesn't see that kind of like, oh yeah, I'm just going to knock you out because I'm high SE, bro. Then everyone in my past was all high force types, everyone. And to me, that's silly.
Yeah, you can actually see this in, you see it in television as well. Television shows various characters, those that are trying too hard to gain leadership, who aren't leadership material, and they're just throwing their weight around. Whereas, and usually you see it with, when it's like the older general who knows when to use force and when to be, and they do appear to be like a mature version of an ESTP, those kind of generals.
Right, and you also learn with time the consequences of your actions. And you can't behave like a 12-year-old kid when you're 50. I mean, I guess you could in theory, but there's a point where you're like, okay, this doesn't make actually any sense why you would do this if you start becoming aware of the consequences of your actions over a period of time. That doesn't mean that we, and I don't speak for the type per se. I try not to attach labels to myself as much anymore, but if I am speaking for the type, I can say specifically that, you know, for me, personal growth is a very big aspect, and it's becoming the best version of myself in leadership. And obviously my motives are quite different than Gamma Quadra, but ultimately it's the same story. Look, I've learned from these lessons and I still struggle with these visions. Like, where am I going to go? What am I doing this for? But it's not, look, this guy's in my way and I'm going to go knock him out. Instead, I can disable him with the least amount of effort. Why am I going to put that much force into it? And I think that's where I'm suspecting is the people who don't have that kind of control over their force are actually struggling with SI.
Also, you're a big NLPer, Chad. So you pretty much, how much do you believe in the presupposition? Well, the useful belief of the meaning of the communication is the other person's reaction to it, the way they respond.
I'm pretty big on that.
Right. So if you're big with that, then you're going to moderate your use of force depending on how it goes with the other person.
Right. I think a lot of people who yearn to have higher force are the ones who exhibit it more, and they try to display it more and try to show it off, and it usually backfires versus the people who actually have the control over it.
Yeah. And if you've got enough sense in terms of reading people, usually you can see those people who are throwing it around. Well, it usually comes from two places, like insecurity or cockiness.
Right.
Yeah. And you can usually read from the person where it's coming from.
Yeah, and maybe it's just me. I mean, I've done martial arts my whole life, and maybe that has an influence on it. You know, it's like, hey, look, I don't need to go start fights with everybody. And yet here we are, ESTPs, or, you know, I don't like these MBTI letters, but, you know, you're talking about SLEs or LSIs, just schoolyard scrapping all the time. And I'm like, okay, hold on. This doesn't make any sense. I was raised and trained to not use force unless it's necessary. And there's times when I've overdone it, but just the unnecessarily means to fight doesn't not, oh, it's sometimes it's the joy of the thrill. I get that because I've done it a lot, but I think there's a misconception about them being bullies and trying to just push everybody around, or being people who always fight. And yeah, sure, that's our goal. We want to rise to the top of any hierarchy or any structure or anything, sure. And we're going to push and shove our way to get there, but that's not always the only answer to the problem.
I remember a series where it was these young men, and it was the sort of the group was ganging up on this guy and saying he was, and this guy was a little bit cocky. And says, "I'm not cocky, I'm confident." And the other people, "No, you're cocky." So what about that, Damon? The difference between confident and cocky?
That's a fine line, because I can say in my early YouTube videos, I was much more cocky than confident, and to the point where I can't even stand watching them. But I leave them up there because I do like people being able to witness that step-by-step progression of, look, this person started here and then they slowly started trimming themselves up into becoming a better person, right? And becoming more socially acceptable in a lot of ways, and being able to make the maximum amount of influence with the least amount of effort. And so when I'm looking at those particular YouTube videos, I'm like, okay, here's a good example of what cocky looks like. And that was really a mask for insecurity in a lot of areas, and primarily in the what I would consider an FE area. So, and I say that because those specific videos were about, look, how many people can I actually influence? And through the use of my words, my use of intonation, and it felt, I don't want to say forced. It didn't feel forced, but looking back, and I watch those videos and I say, wow, that was pretty cocky. And yeah, like, and at the time I think, and even in one of those videos, I might have said that I'm not cocky, I'm confident. And I think that really comes from people who are insecure.
So what have you, it's a bit of digression, but what have you learned from NLP that has changed the way you interact with people?
The understanding that the map that we're drawing every day can be changed. But NLP to me still is not the answer to everything. It's just another tool you can use to help assist. Now, if we go back to like Socionics and we start understanding what our real blind spots are, the biggest question that always kind of circulates to my mind is, can you really get a grasp on, say, your vulnerable function? Or is it always going to be something that blindsides you? Because it would seem that I would have to change a part of my psychology, truly change it, to understand certain things. And I've never been put to the test by it, in the sense of understanding the value of what relations is, or exactly what is relations. I've never been put to the test by it until I got into a long-term committed relationship. And then it really allowed me to see what I didn't know about relations. And it's very hard for me because I do not understand it still.
Well, I think you can, I think that relations is I think the mechanism, I think the CPU of relations is FI, but I also think that that relations can also be done via FE. That is just because it's a subjective feeling of the right thing in the relationship, but I also think that can be done via FE as well. When you said there about the break function, we have Maria here, Socionics expert. So Maria, do you have anything to say about the blind spottedness of the break function? Or how you see it? Okay. Whenever I suggest that when when Maria switches her microphone on to go quiet, and then she'll tell us some gold. Back to you, Damon. Yeah.
So yeah, and I think it really depends on the model, but I can tell you from my perspective, it would be the hardest uphill battle that I've probably ever done. And naturally I'm drawn to the challenge. So that's where I'm like, okay, I'm drawn to this particular challenge. I can do this, but it's because of the challenge. It's hard for me to understand, because what I do is I model relations through my TI, I guess I would call it. And it's like this or that. You do this. If this situation occurs, you do this. If this situation occurs, you do this. It's like a model for me. And it's really hard because relations, there's a lot more nuances to it than I can comprehend. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think I look at the FI part of ethics of relations from, in terms of a useful angle. You can look at the NLP technique of rapport, and then, but if you look at what do people get real rapport over, and with say the delta NFs, it's going to be over values and beliefs, or perceived sharing of those things. But you can actually get rapport over other things. Just two people who come from the same town, who are in another place, just their connection over something, that sense of connection.
Yeah, it's not, the question isn't rapport. The question is how to properly manage the expectation of particular relations. Rapport I can create. I can FE my way to people will like me, fine. You know, that's not an issue, right? And it's the nuances of relations in themselves that's challenging. How to manage the relations after they've been established and how close those relations are. It's like, for me, it's very black or white. It's either, you know, you're in or you're out. It's like, whereas other people can gauge the proper psychological distance between two people, I do not even understand what that means. Like, I am blind to it. I don't understand what that means. It's like, I put labels on people. Like, you're Ben, you're the host of this channel, you're a professional. I'm going to treat you like a professional. Right. And that's it. There's no other understanding beyond that for me. And it's like, if somebody says, well, he's Ben, but he's got 4 energy units in this, and he only likes so much of this and not too much of that. And if you do this, then he won't like that. And I'm just like, what? I'm going to treat him like a professional. That's it. Like, and so it's very hard for me to be able to establish those type of things. And I don't mean to sound like I'm mocking FI. That's not my objective. My objective is just to demonstrate how it circulates through my head. And I can't make sense of it. It's just, it's been a big pain spot because I don't really understand it. And as many times as I've talked to Socionics people, as many times as I've lived my life, I've never been put to the test because, well, I never took relations seriously. I never valued them. I just was like, whatever. It is what it is. Move on. Well, and that was it.
You can try to work on getting on the empathy process, or even if not empathy, working out what's going on inside somebody's head. If you watch really good acting closely, because then it's a sort of a exaggerated version of what you get in real life, because the situations determine what's going on inside somebody's head. And if you watch, say, something like Battlestar Galactica, the remake, with Katie Sackhoff and Edward James Olmos, when someone is that good at acting, it can really take you inside the person. And Jonathan has watched Lie to Me. I don't know if you've seen that, Damon.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit of that. And I think we're speaking different languages here because I'm
giving you ways to get to, like, techniques to get at it, rather than
you're still assuming that I can understand that. I'm looking at acting, and that's what it is to me. It's like I see acting, and then you're able to notice the nuances that allow you to jump in people's shoes. For me, I understand that I will never think like other people. And it's like, and if I try to jump in their shoes, I'm still thinking from my perspective versus their perspective.
Wow.
and I'm still interpreting their actions from the way I perceive and process information versus the other way around.
Another exercise you could try is writing a fictional character from the point of view of that character. You can try those various things.
See, I've tried that, but ultimately what that resulted in was every character fighting to be the boss.
We can sort of force yourself.
I think that's hilarious.
So even if you wrote, say, an EII character, and you tried your best to think from that person's point of view, set yourself the challenge of adapting your thought process to that. A real ultimate challenge, how to think like an EII.
Yeah, that sounds like it's going to be a really hard task.
Okay. How hard do you find it to understand types similar to yourself, like LSI or LIE or whatever? I mean, is it a bit easier to understand them than?
Yeah, I understand logic. Whereas I struggle with more of the relations aspect. Anything that allows me to, so if I were to like write an LIE, for example, it wouldn't be too difficult because it's the relations isn't there, number one. So pretty much they're going to display what is going on. Now, underneath the surface, I have no idea what an LIE is like. It's like, what are they actually thinking? I mean, former YouTuber / MBTV Daniel Speece got interviewed by Jack like 3 days ago, right? Y'all, I don't know if anybody paid attention to that, but assuming that Jack's analysis is correct, he got typed as LIE. All right, so we can operate under that assumption. The one thing that really stood out to me was Daniel values these close personal bonds, and to him, it's like life or death. It's like these bonds are really important, and he's all about authenticity of a relationship. And it's very hard for me to even understand what that means beyond what it says in context. Like, okay, I have my idea what that might mean, but is that what he actually means? And if that's what he actually means, then why does he value that so much? Because to me, it's like, that's kind of meaningless. I don't understand the structure of that.
Well, I could say my version of this, obviously with TE, is it's quite different from FI, but when I was younger and at school and stuff, it was very hard for me to back up my arguments with evidence or to have references and stuff. I ended up pursuing a history degree where that became very, very important. So I learned to get good at it, but a lot of the time what I was doing was I just looked at what I had to write, had to answer a question, write an essay. I would write my answer, and then I would just look for evidence to back up my answer, which isn't really the best way to do it, because once or twice I had to basically rewrite my entire answer once the evidence contradicted the 1,000-odd words I'd said. And then they've also had arguments on the internet where people wouldn't listen to a thing you've said if you don't back up with evidence, even if it's really tiny, petty, pedantic stuff. So I do think I've improved my TE a bit, especially compared to other IEIs, or any IEI. In fact, I'm better than all the IEIs at TE as far as backing up my argument with evidence. Not as far as actually producing stuff.
The following question, Jonathan, would be: if you're better at evidence, show me the evidence that you're actually better. Can you metricize how you're better at gathering evidence than the other IEIs?
Yes, I can, just not right now.
I'm totally messing with you, though.
Yeah, I wouldn't show you, but I can.
Yeah, exactly. You wouldn't want to, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we'll just accept that you're the sage of the room.
Correct. Well, you admitted that before we even went in there.
I already knew that, though.
Yeah. Anyway, we're kind of off topic. This may be a beta Quadra out.
This is a Ben hangout. We can go off topic. I think it's allowed, right, Ben?
It's all within the same area. You're talking about II, you're talking about SLE, we're talking about FI break. It's all within the same. We've not digressed onto economics or anything outside of the Quadra.
We're talking about the vulnerable function. You're talking about how TE you've improved it. Where I feel like a 3-year-old with FI. It's dangerous. So the question I have for multiple people well, is like, how do you guys experience FI? And before you explain, can you describe to me what your understanding of FI is? Because I want to make sure we're all on the same definitions. Okay, because if we have different definitions, that's going to make for muddled communication.
Right, so I think Ben first, because I've got a cough coming.
So, the way when I was younger, I used to be, I still am very idealistic. So my sort of chi type is like 714. So there is a strong gut feeling of right and wrong. I always had that. In terms of the right thing to do in interacting with somebody, that was like a little feeling that was in the background where I had to sort of attune that to that sense of, oh, is this the right thing to do? Like the not going away from the logic of it and to the gut feeling of it, because I would sort of like rationalize something the way I wanted it to be. I had to like put that to a side and go with that little gut feeling in the background of, because I once did a hangout called How Should INTPs Act on Facebook? And it was about, and other people related to this, even female INTPs, and that was when they would meet somebody, they would get over enthusiastic and it would be, oh, what about this, 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 and this? And it would overload the person. And frequently people that I interact are aware of the any overload with me. And so, because what happens is the INTP thinks like this, oh, this person's interested, they're actually interested in this stuff. And then they gives them, oh, what about this, 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 and this? As everything then pops up into their mind. Now, a little technique for that, again, these techniques can help. We'll just pass it all out. Write down all the things they might be interested in, just parcel it out over the weeks rather than giving them an info dump of it. But so that would be the natural instinct. But then it's now you get the little feeling of don't do that. And it's listening to that little feeling in the background. And it is just a feeling. It is just a sense. And sometimes we can TI it, analyze it. So that's way FI works for me in terms of determining an ethics of relations. I generally go with the actual Jungian definition of FI. I like Jung's definition of FI, which is subjective feeling. And he even in his description of FI, he even explains when it can go wrong when the person becomes egocentric, and how they can lose the ability to empathize because they have become egocentric. And you can see this with the ability of FPs of various health levels. The healthier they are, the more they're in a fair witness position where they're not imposing their own baggage when they're reading the other person. If they can put that to one side, then they can be extremely good at imaginatively putting themselves inside somebody in reading their emotional state. But frequently they will project into that person. And I've heard that, especially from Morgan, Jeff's son, that the STPs hate that when the NFPs project into them motives that they don't actually have.
So a couple things that stood out. Number one is you first defined FI. It sounded like you defined FI as a system of morality.
It's part of it.
Yeah.
It's FI based. It's part of it. That's what's tricky, because, and Carl Jung wrote about it with, there's little hints at the shadow functions in Carl Jung's work, like role function and control function. And I'll bring it up later on. I'll show you what he wrote about FI. And
what I was trying to get to though was that if it's a system of morality and we're looking at it like, okay, we have a series of morality that would assume that I would imagine that would assume that people with stronger or more dimensionality to their FI are more moral people.
Yeah, I'm gonna interrupt because I'm never gonna talk if I don't do that.
Go on then.
I would say FI is not a system of morality because every human being has a system of morality. FI in some systems is a system of addressing a person's morality the way it comes out, but it's not the morality itself because we all have that.
Yeah, I mean, I've written that in my notes. It's just hard to.
And it's definitely not that specifically in Socionics.
Yeah,
We're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Also, I would like to point out, why the hell are we talking about all the polar functions of beta quadra instead of talking about beta quadra?
I think because people have read the stereotypes enough, we make a name for ourselves. And besides, typing is really helpful when you start identifying what is weak and valued versus weak and unvalued.
Yeah, because...
Oh yeah, it's definitely true. I mean, yeah, but we're talking about the weakness. Shouldn't we talk about what beta quadra is?
We start with the negative. What's missing?
Yeah, it's a long hangout, but because it can also then get to with how the IEI can help the SLE with it. But
since we didn't
the way I see, we recently did a hangout with Shannon, who's ESI and ISFP, and Imogen, and we went and we looked at some of the differences between ISFP and INFP. So temperament is a big thing when it comes to the FI. So with INFP, they are more likely to, and because they are an introvert and an abstract type, they are more likely to abstractify their feeling, and their thinking will be feeling based. In my opinion, I see the thinking of EII as feeling based. So when you then go from the feeling and then you think about it, that's when you then get the morals plus the anything of this is an absolute that works across all of these different situations. Whereas somebody who is more SE valuing, especially if we look at SE the way Dario Nardi defines it, where it's what is in the present context, then it might be, okay, this is the right thing to do in this context. What I feel is right in this context, rather than sticking to something across many situations.
So, again, you know, that's where I have a huge blockage when it comes to this intermingling of taxonomies, because it becomes very confusing for me, because you hear a definition to me that needs to be validated in a certain way, and sure, it internally with itself it's consistent, but then you start meshing it with other systems like MBTI. I've studied MBTI for a long time, and MBTI is very much about FI being about morality. But throughout my life, I've been called one of the most moral people, as consistently. I have a very strong system of morals. But as far as ethics of relations,
right.
And the other half of what you said, being able to project yourself in someone else's shoes, that is difficult for me, where morality is not an issue for me at all. So that's why I question it. And I said, it would be safe to assume if morality were part of FI, that someone with strong or high dimensionality in FI would naturally be someone who has more morality. That's why I question that definition of it. Whereas I do understand the ethics of relations as something that, okay, if that's the case, okay, I can connect to other people, or people project themselves into my shoes. I do hate that. I hate when people think they understand me without actually talking to me. That irritates me. It's like, you need to get the information first before you start giving me unsolicited advice, because you have no idea of the situation which is at hand, nor the details of it, but you think somehow you can look at me and you can read my character and you can tell me how everything is. That annoys the living crap out of me. And so there's that aspect too. So it's like, I definitely relate with that. Whereas the morality thing, I think that's the gray area of which taxonomy are we talking about? Because SE is another thing. Dario Nardi believes it's just the awareness of physical environment, which...
Not just that.
What you can do in context, right? So it's like, okay, what you can do in the situation at hand. But it would include, if you're not aware of the situation at hand, then it probably wouldn't be very helpful to have contextual thinking in the situation at hand. And so, sure, that may be a good definition of SE in certain taxonomies. But the reason why that I lean more toward the socionic side of it is because, to me, it does not create a hierarchy in the sense of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the better you are at being aware of your physical environment, that means I'm better at sports. I don't like that, because to me, that's not accurate. You have certain people who may be intuitive, who may be great players at sports, and to assume that they have higher SE or awareness of their surroundings or contextual does not mean that they're all SE users. That I think that's very, very behavioral, stereotypical, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I'm not equating.
FI has a quality of subjective value. And people who have strong FI, they have better understanding how to get along with other people in the sense of they don't offend those internal values.
That makes sense to me. That makes sense.
As far as morality, I think every type has its own morality based mainly in their management function. Like an I type, morality is based on helping other people progress and not wasting their time. So different facets of the introverted intuition, helping people connect with themselves and so on. And they can go to great lengths trying to achieve that. But for instance, for SLE, the management function is power sensing, and they feel responsible for everybody, and that's how they can be very morally advanced.
I only got a portion of that because the audio was kind of unclear. But
I was saying that the morality of SLE is based on their management function, which means they're responsible for people around them.
You said SLP. Well, what's SLP?
No, SLE.
What is that?
SLE, ESTP.
Oh, SLE. Oh, okay, got it. Gotcha.
Yeah, because of the so
their moral of responsibility.
Okay.
Oh, I see. So you're putting responsibility. It sounds very 8-ish, doesn't it, Jonathan? The way Maria describes management SE in being responsible for the people around. It sounds like the 8 going to 2.
Well, they can be responsible in and of itself. They'll have their own idea of responsibility. 2 is more about they go to 2 is more like the 8 getting in touch with their softer side, their softer emotions, which is slightly different. The 8 is naturally protective, though.
What I mean is from the outside behavior. When Maria said that management SE is taking care of those around them, from the outside, I would say, oh, that looks like an 8 that's gone to 2. If I was to,
No, it could look. It could look like that, but I would still say that's just 8 being protective.
I can agree with that. It's like, you may feel that it's the incentive is to help those, but in reality, it might be just to maintain control. And so, if we're talking about 8s, I'm not talking about.
Yeah. Well, it's because whenever Ben reads ESTP or whatever, he always thinks 8, or whenever he's 8, he always thinks ESTP because there's overlap, and he's just mixing things up in this way.
No, I'm just saying what it looks like and understanding it through that different angle.
But sometimes they are also what is called in humanitarian socionics like managers club or practices practical club. So they are one of the types who manage things, and they are very sensitive to the practical state of things, and they also can do very strange things like giving the computer to the neighbor who seems to need it more, because it's a better use of the computer. It's practical.
Can't quite make you out. Your audio is a bit bad. Sorry.
You sound as if you're in like a metal tube, like a 1950s spaceship or something, with That's how it sounds in the background. Are you doing something slightly different, Maria? Are you holding it further away? Are you?
It's just the kind of computer I'm using.
Oh, using a computer, right? It might be better if you used a because you've used a mobile device in the past. I think.
The kid is somewhere.
Okay.
Is it very bad, or can you still hear me?
It's
I
pretty.
can just about make out.
It's pretty bad. We can barely hear you.
Okay, I'll.
Okay.
All right.
Well,
She'll probably be back and with a mobile device that she's used before.
anyway, my understanding of FI, I think, when I look at all these different definitions, all these different taxonomies, I usually think that this is people of different types or backgrounds, or whatever, just coming up with new systems based on or new definitions based on their own understanding of it, and that will vary by their personality and by their experience or whatever. I think FI at its absolute core is your own internal feelings, basically. And paying attention to your own feelings and your own emotions and the depth of your emotions and so on. Whereas FE is more about other people's emotions and other people's feelings. That I think is the absolute core of it. So, as far as FI being morality based, it's somewhat, isn't it? It's really more like strong emotional resonance and how you relate to things and so on. I don't think many IEIs would think that FI is, the most moral of functions. They'll have their own biases as far as that goes. Like they'll be thinking that person is a bit too self-absorbed, they're a bit too invest. Or I always think they can see a bit too invested in things that they personally relate to. But there's always an element of they don't like it because they wouldn't like how they would feel in that situation, or they feel strongly about this issue because it affects them in some way, but they don't feel strongly about this other issue, which is quite similar, but it doesn't affect them or it doesn't relate to them somehow. So that's my understanding of it. With as far as my own type goes, usually I experience FI as if I have a strong emotional reaction to something, I will either sidestep it or work around it somehow, using my FE to kind of slither around the issue and try and handle it as diplomatically as possible. Whereas those who prefer FI will generally act on their FI or take it out if I'm making any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I think you're making sense. I'm just laughing because this is a beta hangout and we're all trying to describe FI.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying. We're still doing it.
But it's how we perceive FI, right? And the thing is that we naturally, because we are looking for, I want commonality in the sense of taxonomy, or we're never going to be able to have a conversation. Yeah. Because if you're talking about FI and I'm talking about FI, but our frames are different, then we're not getting anywhere with the conversation. And that's one thing I'd like to avoid.
What I'll say though is I have absolutely no problem whatsoever getting in the mindset or getting an impression of what each type feels like or what each type understands the world. It's usually just a matter of just all I have to do is stand aside and think about it for a second. Then I can get in the mindset. Like I can easily imagine how an SLE perceives the world if I've been around. I can't necessarily do it myself, but I can easily imagine what it's like, especially if I've, dipping into my own SE and just imagining, okay, I'm like that all the time. What's it like to be like that all the time?
I'm tempted to ask you how you think an SLE perceives the world. I want to hear it from the other side.
It's hard to articulate. It just feels like, being in
that's what I'm tempted to ask you. Don't feel the pressure to answer.
Thank God. Okay, I won't answer because it's hard. It's hard, but Yeah.
Yeah, don't worry. I'll spare you the strain, right?
Yeah, it's just a matter of, you know, paying attention to people and going into depth. But yeah, I mean, I know some SLEs in real life and family and stuff, so that helps a bit. But you know, I was at school and stuff, so I've got an idea of. Also know what the behaviour's like, but getting in that mindset isn't hard. I don't find any mindset in particular hard. I find it, in fact, I take it as a personal failure if I can't understand someone.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so it's the next person's turn. I think it's Santa's turn, and she left. It's typical.
She ran off.
Well, we have.
Raquel.
You saw my reaction.
A volunteer.
The arms went in the air when Raquel arrived. So Raquel, therapist, good with people. So
Good with people.
what do you,
She has all the answers.
right. So Damon, if you say that thing about the problem that you have, if you say it again about the problem you have with the ethics of relations things, if you like explain the problem that you have, then Raquel can comment on that as an expert.
The problem I have a lot of problems with ethics of relations. So which one are you talking about?
Well, the one that you mentioned before about knowing what the appropriate thing to do is, or the feeling of being able to put yourself inside another person's shoes, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. So what is this? Is this a drill? Oh, I'm trying to figure out what we want to get out of this.
Raquel's perspective on that should probably be able to say something that's insightful in that area.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to understand the scope of what we were doing. Okay. So FI, it is the most confusing possible thing. I mean, in definition, I understand the definition, but it is the most confusing thing I can think of. And it's not just, I didn't have to ever face it because I never committed to a long-term relationship because you didn't need ethics of relations. You just make people feel a certain way and disappear. And that was the easiest way. Hey, look, I can manipulate your emotions and I can go away. And so as with time, that was obviously an immature mindset. So it's like, okay, I suck in this area. Let's figure this out. So as I got into a long-term relationship, you start really seeing someone who values FI and how they see the world. And it directly clashes with the models that I create of the world. And we've worked a lot of it out. We're both very personal development driven. But as a result, I still don't understand the nuances of certain things that someone who values TE number one and FI, which is, hey, look, this is situational. It's case by case. So you need to give the whole case so that I can understand the situation, so I can understand what was implied by the situation, even though I understand the situation because I experienced it. So I give the wrong details. Somebody asks me for details in a scenario and I give the wrong details. That's a good example. It's like what I think is important is not important at all to the other person. And that is where I get confused, because to me, it's like, okay, let's make a hypothetical example up. If I went to the grocery store and got groceries, what'd you do? I went to the grocery store. When? Well, why does when matter? I did it. Like, I don't understand why when would matter. But it's those situational things that, to me, I can't understand about FI that causes me a lot of stress, because it's like, I don't understand why that is pertinent. But there's nuances to it that make no sense, and to me. And I'm not saying they're stupid. It's just that I know, and I've become aware that I'm completely blind to it. And that is the challenge. I can't even describe. I'm so blind to it, I can't even describe it. That's how difficult it is. It's like, I can't even describe it. That's the best effort I can give you. It's like, I listen to a certain thing and I'm like, okay, what are you trying? What is the issue with this? What is the problem with this? What is it? What is this thing that this particular person may have an issue with that values FI? And this is probably why I've clashed with FI people quite a bit as far as the Socionics goes. People who have a Socionics FI. Whereas if they're MBTI FI, it's a very vastly different story. So keeping within the same taxonomy of Socionics, I struggle with that aspect of FI.
So, Damon, could you say, for Raquel, could you go over your definition of ethics of relations?
Yes, it's the formal definition of strong or identifying personal psychological distance between you and another person, and understanding what the boundaries are based on where that person is in that distance. So if that person's really close, how close can you get them without crossing boundaries? And if that person's not as close, then how close can you get without, like, if that person's not as close, what's the proper way to behave based on that person's psychological distance, which I don't understand.
Have you got enough information, Raquel, to form a fantastic opinion?
Actually, as he was talking, I was taking some notes, and what he's saying, his definition of ethics of relationships was kind of close in line with what I was actually writing down. So I was saying, the first note I have is that it takes a good degree of self-awareness to have empathy for someone else. You have to know where you're coming from in order to know where they're coming from, because I guess, you know, a certain degree of projection could happen there, or we're just totally misinterpreting what they're saying because we're not even aware of what's going on inside of ourselves. When it comes to morality, and particularly when he was saying, I can't even describe it, what happens is if it's too far away from you, you're not going to be able to perceive it. So it has to be something that causes enough dissonance in your mind or enough anxiety to be able to recognize that something is going on. So it can't be too close to your own views, but it also can't be too far away if you want to understand where your partner's coming from. And this kind of ties into the kinesthetic, like in NLP, like we were talking about last night, which I did look over. It's what are you experiencing and what's your perception of what you're experiencing, because we'll all experience different things, and our interpretation of those things will be very different too. So taking a look at that when it comes to morality, understanding that morality of relationships, perhaps I can be experiencing the same and something different.
I got to interrupt for a second. So I'm very unfond of that word morality when it comes to FI. I do not correlate those two. I call it ethics of relations because it's established by others, whereas morality is intrapersonal. And
Right.
I believe that I have a very strong moral code, and I consider myself a pretty moral person. Although I have done things that I regret, I would question the use of the term morality, and I would stick with the term ethics.
Jonathan, you once talked about the difference between ethics and morality.
Well, I did, yes, but what I said was they're the same thing, just in different languages. Like ethics comes from the Greek, and morality comes from the Latin, and it's basically the Latin word for ethics. That's why I said back in the day. So I know so many people have different definitions of ethics and morality.
Definitions aside, though, I don't associate FI with morality. And
yeah, I understand that too.
Yeah,
I kind of agree with you there as well.
If there's something I associate FI with, it's subjectivity, and sometimes subjectivity is something, you know, who wants that? I don't want to be subjective, and from that standpoint, I really like that about the ESTP, that they kind of treat everybody equally, just as a sort, you know, probably as a person with a problem, maybe who needs help, or as a person who can do something as a professional and whatnot, but never as somebody who has a special relationship.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, I also see it.
But it kind of plays against you if you do have a special relationship with them.
Oh, I know. That's where the Achilles heel is.
So, Maria, what are the best ways in your experience to help SLE with ethics of relations?
Well, my intuition about this was to treat them as some progressors from 22nd century who just don't necessarily fit in the current society with their standpoint on morals.
Could you rephrase that? Like, I guess the question he was asking was, how do you help someone who struggles with ethics of relations? And I didn't hear what you said exactly.
I probably wasn't answering the question, but sometimes SLE will come to me with a question on how to feel about certain things. And what they mainly what they need help with is like feelings processing and kind of developing the idea how to see things and whether to value them or not.
I think that's fair. Yeah. I don't know if that answers the question, but I certainly can agree with that. I don't know how
one example, which was just recently, a lady, SLE, who I just barely know, she was talking to me at the Poland. Then she kind of spotted a big crowd of Chinese hanging out by the pool, and she said, "Well, I'm not a chauvinist, but somehow that influx worries me." And I went on explaining that actually she might as well be happy because the Chinese bring with them good attitude to education. They like our kids will have hardworking and smart friends in school, and we'll have more cheap extracurriculars because good cheap extracurriculars are where the demand is, and it's a change for the better. So she kind of agreed that that was a good point. So she kind of came to me for reevaluation of something.
So I see what you did there, Marie, is you, in order to get her to the result that you wanted to get her to, you actually put it in terms that she valued. So you actually put it in pragmatic terms.
Yeah.
You reframe the situation in the way that she metabolizes information, as it were.
Yeah, because that's pretty apparent, and I know some people. Well, it would be pointless for her to come to somebody who would try to dig into her attitude. Like,
gotcha.
No, this is not good.
Without understanding where she's coming from, and that's I like what you're saying because that ties into what I was saying, right? Yeah.
As a type, we like to see ourselves as rational. I mean, INFJs, IEIs, and that's how we present things without actually addressing the conventional moral thing, which we also don't like very much, because our creative FI has a way of seeing that everybody's morals are just a result of their experience. Their preferences are a result of their experience. So as such, they kind of have a very relative value.
Okay. Well,
there is nothing set in stone here.
That's a little above for me to comprehend.
I just mean that if somebody doesn't value something or has bad feelings about it, it means their experience led them to it. And if you give them a way to have a different experience, they may move to different values and feelings.
Okay, that makes sense. I got it now. I do want to comment on something that Raquel said a little while ago before I got into this side topic. She mentioned that, well, you're actually right here. I thought you disappeared for a second. So you're here. So what you did mention that you were talking about getting in the other person's shoes, which I agree with. I think the challenge is when someone's a completely different type of information metabolism, it is very difficult to see the world the way they do. As far as someone, let's say that I have low dimensionality FI, or somebody who has strong or high dimensionality FI, that probably is a much easier task to even jump into somebody's shoes with a different type of information metabolism. Now, so that's where I think the challenge is, because I'm determined to do it. It's like I'm trying to understand it because I understand why I need it. But at the same time, it feels like every time I do it, I'm still wrong inherently about the perspective that I perceive them from that person. It first was everybody thinks like I think. That's what the original mentality I had back when I was a teen. So if everybody thinks like I think, then that's how I would feel in the situation. So I would treat them how I would feel. And then I came to realize that's not true. So then I was like, I'll try to think how they think. And then I came to realize that that wasn't true either. because when I was thinking like they think, the frame is still coming from an SLE viewing the perspective of them in an SLE lens. No matter what, you can't take the SLE lens off. That's where the challenge is for me. Now, no matter what, I always am going to see through my own eyes. I cannot completely detach from my world experience to be able to determine objectively what their perspective actually is. I can only assume as far as it goes, and with low dimensionality, I'm sure that makes the problem much more challenging than it actually is. So that's where I have that. Okay, that's great advice, not just from anyone and everyone in this room, but it's asking me to climb Everest with no cold gear on at all. And that's where I feel the challenge is.
Because that person is also not saying where you're coming from. What happens is that causes too much dissonance in your mind. It's too far away from your framework to be able to see where that person is coming from. And because it's too different, we discard it. We can't rationalize it. We can't understand or comprehend because it's not a part of our foundation.
Right. But that's the thing. Even the baby steps that it takes to get there. It's like, okay, trying to understand FI. That's why I got into a lot of the socionics and the deep type of information metabolism stuff, is because I make an effort to be able to try to understand, because I have surrendered to the idea that I have no clue where people are coming from. And as far as it is the way they see the world, I think as somebody, it's always a competition with everything. And whereas other people don't see that.
Not your fault either. That's who you are, and that's your framework too. And perhaps their misunderstanding, Yeah,
I think it's a two-way street, of course. I mean, you can pair me with somebody of the same type of information metabolism. We're like, yeah, bro, it's all good. And then you meet somebody who has a completely opposite type of information metabolism, and you naturally don't speak the same language. Fine. But I think that after a while, there is a point where you're like, okay, this is starting to bridge the gap. And that's kind of where I'm at, is like, I need the baby steps to make this work, because I'm not ready to climb Everest yet. I can't jump from never climbing a mountain to all of it. So it's why I'm engaged with people of other types. Like, for example, if I can see demonstrative FI from the IEIs in here, and then I see ignoring FI, say from an EIE, such as yourself, then it starts painting a better picture for me. It starts bridging the gap one step at a time. Is that a fair way to begin this process? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yes, you're doing well.
I like the clarity in the answer. Yes.
There might be.
I always can turn to you, Jonathan. You always come at the right time with the perfect delivery. Yes.
If you want an example of somebody who is FI break, who's trying to understand people, that's Catherine Favre.
I don't agree with that, but let's not even speculate about that. Let's not go off topic there. Anyway.
So she's talked about 3 kinds of empathy: emotional empathy, cognitive empathy, and kinesthetic empathy. Different routes.
That's not just her though. That's actually, there's scientific research into that area. So yeah, but that's another story.
So what I want to mention is that Santa hasn't had a lot of airtime, so we're going to get her input on the situation.
Whether she likes it or not.
Let's throw you into the wolves' den, and let's get some insight from you.
What do you want insight on specifically?
Anything we just discussed.
Specifically.
I'm basically calling her out for tuning out this whole conversation.
I'm just wondering why we're talking about FI so much. I mean,
yeah.
I thought it was just a matter of defining it, but now we've spent like what?
Yeah, this is
defining it.
We should rename this to FI conversation. Beta's attempt to figure out FI.
Yeah,
we need a different hangout to talk about the beta quadrant.
So anyway,
and with more planning.
Anyway, I do consider FI to come easy to me. I don't have any trouble defining those nuanced views of interpersonal distance with people or things. I do it automatically. I don't specifically like to talk about it unless it's with somebody who's in the very innermost circle of FI for me. Otherwise, I just kind of keep it to myself a lot of the time, unless someone asks for help, in which case I will help.
Okay, so you don't like to talk about like FI matters, or you don't like to talk about FI in itself? Is that why?
Okay. how do we define FI matters? Because we have like 3 different definitions in this conversation
How do you
only.
define FI matters, because you're the one speaking? So that's the one I want to know, what your frame of FI matters is. And you said you don't like to talk about it, and I'm just clarifying what it means.
I specify it as the Socionics definition of interpersonal distance. There is some merit, I think, to values as well when it comes to it, but not because FI is stronger at it, but because you have to determine those interpersonal distances somehow, and that's usually based on subjective values that you hold. It's not only based on that, but there is something to be said about it.
So Sana, in a private conversation, you once used the phrase processing FI information. So what to you is FI information?
Wait, when did I say that? When did I say processing?
It was in a private conversation about somebody and about their inability to process that kind of information. And I just wondered, but if by citing, if you cite what the FI information is, that gives some bearing on how you see the function.
I don't remember saying processing. I do think that polar FI is kind of blind to it, as in no matter how much FI messaging I think I'm sending out, they're never going to catch it because they just don't pay attention to that kind of info. Is that what you referred to? Oh, what specifically?
What specifically is that info that you send out?
For example, if I have determined that this is not a person I want to have any kind of a close relationship with, I have specified a certain distance. They will not understand that I've done this on its own. I have to either tell them, or I have to FE it, or I have to do something. They will not just, a high dimensionality FI user would just understand it once it happens.
In such cases, I use SE signaling, like just never looking at the person.
Yeah, that works too. It's slightly less useful online, but yeah. Or just plain telling them I don't want to talk about this topic. I mean, it's probably usually not the best idea to say I don't want to talk to you, but you can kind of get there.
Right. So what Maria said there reminded me of something I said yesterday and something I saw in a book, The Charisma Myth, where, so Maria says they're not looking at them, so you're not giving them attention. And maybe somebody else will make a complex equivalence between attention and connection. If the person, you've really got the attention of somebody else, then you could say, oh, I'm really connecting with this person because you feel you've got the attention of them. Raquel, you once said something interesting about that did you say that you almost need other people to help you make a decision? Could you talk about that, please? Because that gives a bearing on FE and FI.
Well, I'm someone who will have a feeling about something, but in order to validate that feeling, I have to go out and ask like 7 people. And then based on what the community says, I kind of weigh that information because I'm like always balancing my perception with the outside world and testing to see if it's right. Ultimately, I most of the time end up going with what I believe, but it is really important for me to consider all aspects of the situation. And when we're talking about psychological closeness, I am more inclined to value the opinions of people who I'm psychologically close to. So if we're looking at what do you do when you don't like someone, well, I'm not listening to what you say. I'm not taking your advice. I'm not, I'm not respecting and valuing your input.
Right.
I don't know if you're looking for more than that.
That's okay. I was just noticed how your pen is coordinated with your fingernails.
Ah.
Right. So I think you once in a previous hangout you talked about that. Right. So you and do you think, and have you that problem of someone, because in Socionics that's like FI ignoring for the FE DOMs, where they'll sort of put their own subjective feelings to one side. Now, according to Victor Galenko, the FE DOMs have a lot of information for that kind of thing, but they put it to one side. Now, that is hinted at in Carl Jung in certain of the descriptions where he talks about the other side of a function is suppressed. So, for example, he gives the example of for the introverted thinking type, they are aware of extroverted thinking stuff, objective thinking stuff. Otherwise, their thoughts would just disappear into the sky. And it says the same with the extroverted thinking types, the TE DOMs, that if they were unaware, if the subjective thinking process was not there at all, they wouldn't be able to interpret the data. It would just be the data in front of them. So there's little hints at this.
Which is interesting because I do consider myself to be fairly subjective and not at the same time. Like I can really take a step aside and look at the bigger picture and also look at maybe I'm not right, and I do that frequently. But I do very much have a good sense of things just from my own feelings.
Yeah, Karla, I muted you. When you want to speak, if you switch your microphone on, that will be a signal to others that you wish to speak, and it will, because your sound is a little bit stucky at the moment.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's at the moment on.
You have a lot of
static.
You have a lot of static when you're not talking. So
if using the keyboard, Control D is a quick way to switch the microphone on and off.
Just a second.
Right, there we go. So FI.
I'm actually gonna try to, is it still really bad when I'm not talking?
It's okay now. It's okay now.
Yeah, it's also when you're talking, it's fine. It just kind of appears when you're not. So if you just mute yourself when you're talking, I think it's fine.
Can do that.
Right. So while we have Raquel here, Sana, have you got any questions for her?
Not specifically.
About okay.
About what?
Well, I just thought it maybe crowbarring maybe something that you would have asked in the counselling hangout, but it's a thing that is relevant for betas.
I'm just winging it. I don't really have anything prepared.
All right, so we're off the topic of FI now, right?
Yes,
I think so.
All right, so we will make the annotation to not return to FI whatsoever. You good?
Were you talking about an FI when you are having a beta chat?
That's what I was asking the entire time.
Alrighty.
I know it sounds funny, but there's a purpose for it. You all understand FI to some extent. I am an idiot, and I want to understand the thing I don't understand.
Why do you want to understand FI? Nobody values it in this room, so who cares?
We can't talk about FI anymore.
Right.
Sorry.
All right.
Okay, Sana, you're good at this. Do you want to give a definition of ethics of emotions in socionics?
The way I perceive it is the awareness of the emotional dynamic in yourself and others. This can come out as expression. I think if valuing people generally prefer to express how they feel instead of holding it in a kind of a moment-to-moment basis. I feel FE is kind of fast-paced. It's not the same long-term sentiments that FI is usually interested in. That's basically it. I mean, there's a lot more to it, but that's a short version.
Raquel, you did that short video and you told that story about the guy who you thought was on drugs, and it appeared that you used a bit of NLP on him, and then I showed it to Sana and she admired the FE. And could you talk about that again, because that's an example of high FE use, I think.
So I went to a bar on the holiday, and I was with a group of friends, and when I go out, I'm very social, I like people, but I tend to take the back seat in my friendships. I don't really talk a lot. And there was this guy who came up to our group, and he was obviously on drugs, probably cocaine. And so I mentioned to a friend, I said, he's on drugs, and they kind of agreed. And so my friends are talking, and he kept on making eye contact with me, probably because he found me attractive. And I knew I was going to take that moment to do something about it. So he's very, very high on whatever drug. And I leaned forward and I told him, I said, "You're going to have a dream about me." And just like in this really like mysterious, like whimsical voice. And then I just kind of faded back and sat back down. And then the night went on, and he was talking about, and by the way, my friends are counselors, so people just gravitate towards us. So he starts talking about his addiction and how people only want to be friends with him because he sells and buys drugs or whatever. And so at the end of the night, towards the end of the night, I told him, I said, "I will blow cocaine in your face." And he goes, "Really?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And then I didn't say anything else. And the night went on, and he never followed up on it, thank God, because I don't know what I would end up doing. But it created this moment for him, which of course, I don't know, he could have left and used, but it created this moment where he was allowed to choose to do something that he didn't want to do. And then part of him did want to do it, and he didn't choose to take me up on that experience. And I commonly do very weird stuff like that when I'm out in public.
I remember I showed you a bit about Erickson, and you said you are Milton H. Erickson.
Yes, thank you so much for that reference. That was a good way to point me. I really enjoyed the read on that guy.
What do you think of him, and how the similarities between what he did and you do?
I find it similar. I'm someone who will often use paradoxes and prescribe the symptom to my clients. You know, it's like, "Oh, I wash my hands 30 times a day." I'm like, "Wash them 31," because it puts back the control. And I also liked what he was talking about, the slight ways that we can hypnotize people, and that we go in and out of states of hypnotism without even realizing it, but how you can provoke those sort of things to give people your input. What's it called? Suggestibility. You can use that for suggestibility, putting someone into a hypnotic state by throwing them off their rocker or whatever that may be, giving them a weird handshake, and using that opportunity to say whatever you need to say to put information in their mind.
Right then. You're a natural when so that would be, for me, that sounds like that's FE, but these things are not working in isolation. That's FE with NF. It's using it for NF reasons, and especially usually with the NFJs, it's with mentoring people, even on an amateur level.
Speaking of creative NE,
go on, Mara.
I was thinking about this is an example of using creative NE.
Go on, Mara. Yes, it's so sort of using it as a tool.
Do you not? No. This monologue for me was kind of a lot of examples of using creative extroverted intuition.
Okay. Do you want to give some more details on that, Mara?
Do you mean creative, or do
It's
you
just
mean demonstrative?
a lot of, not just ethics of emotion, but a lot of unusual things, things that create some sort of feeling of something unexpected, and you don't know where they will go from there.
So you're saying she's using her demonstrative NE.
Model A demonstrative is Model G creative.
Okay. I'm more in Model H, so sorry if I use terminology you guys
yeah,
don't.
In this case, I see that it's called creative for a reason. There is a lot of creativity attached to this in this case. Creative use of surprise.
It's almost as if it's like with ESTP. It's very difficult to separate them away from extroverted thinking because they're always doing practical thinking. Are you not doing practical thinking, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, I do it, but it's like I do it all the time, but I don't really care that about it. It's like I use it as it just comes out all the time. I'm just, what can I optimize? And let's get to the point. Let's move. Yeah, it's always coming out. And it's why a lot of people still consider me gamma, because they see that. So
yeah, they also don't look at your biography and how much you've trained up your TE through. Did you do a business degree?
Yep.
And NLP as well? And
Yep.
You've been in business. So I think you've developed things that we would put in that functional bucket. And that's what I think Socionics people forget about. They forget about development.
Right. And I think they forget that, you know, at the core, it's what kind of behavior would you expect from someone who values P or values F or values both. And the idea behind it is that although I don't value P, I'm good at it. If I valued P more than I valued F, such as in an LIE, I wouldn't be as impulsive as I am. You know, my girlfriend spends a lot of time telling me, she's like, that probably wasn't the best purchase long term. And I'm like, so it's like, yeah, okay, I can agree to that. But you know what? It's so fun right now.
Right. So do you agree, Chad, with the, I'll just put this line in from Jeff, being impulsive is being alive. That's what Jeff would say.
I think there's an impulsivity. It gets confused with spontaneity, though, and it depends on what you're being impulsive about. See, I'm not as impulsive in the sense of relations, because I obviously know that I don't know. But I am impulsive in the sense of financial. I'm impulsive in the sense of seeing opportunity and seizing it immediately. And when I see an opportunity, I do that. It's like I'm impulsive in how I speak. I answer before I even think it through. And those type of things to me are all very sensory focused.
So,
well, I noticed that about the ESTP, that sometimes like when they're fixing something, they may not even like see what their hands are doing, that their hands are doing the thinking.
I think that's fair. I've worked on cars my entire life and all kinds of mechanics and those type of things. I can literally have a full scale conversation, think about the conversation, and I'm just doing the work.
Yeah, and that's handy if you're like an emergency surgeon or something, when you really need to work quickly.
Where in business do you focus on, though? So are you into more like marketing or sales, or are you doing, I mean, I'm a business student, so kind of interested in where do you kind of naturally gravitate in the field of business?
Sales and operations. Sales primarily. That's my favorite thing. Closing deals, negotiating, being able to put pressure on.
I mean, I've done it, and I'm actually at the moment working in a job where I'm in sales, and my manager is an SLE, so that's interesting. Also, in the school I'm in, I'd say around 1/3 is SLEs.
Mm-hmm. I would summarize and say that I'm really focused on more of the entrepreneurship side, the startup, level, being able to put the rubber where the rubber meets the road and being able to do a startup. That's where my primary focus is doing everything, which is raising capital, hiring, doing all those things. And that is where I would feel most comfortable, and I enjoy that aspect the most. I can't see Ben's screen, but he's trying to show.
It's adaptive enterpriser, because in Keirsey, STPs and NTJs are adaptive enterprisers. So the difference between the two will be strategic versus tactical. But
yeah, I'd love to think that I'm a strategist, but it's like I never really have a long-term plan. It's like it's always short-term, and it's like, okay, I can do this right now, but then after 6 months of doing it, I'm like, this is not really what I wanted to do. Let me change gears. Let me shift perspectives, and let me do something else. And I do that quite a bit, and it's like I enjoy the grind of it. And then when it starts getting to the mundane, it's like, okay, I need something to work with. So I feel that for me, it's very much more of a tactical, up to a year type strategy versus, okay, let's think of 10-year plan. I'm like, that's ridiculous. Nobody can predict down the road 10 years what's going to happen. Why even make a 10-year business plan? That's silly.
Yeah, and especially when interest rates are low and it messes up NTJs.
I don't even think about interest rates. Like, dude, who cares? Like, it's like you can go grind harder and you can get what you want. And
yeah, I was just saying that there's an outside thing that really does mess up their intuition of time, because they end up having projects that go too far into the future where the payoff, you got that J curve. It's like it goes so far into the future, it's going to be ages before the money gets paid back. And these things happen because the intuition of time is just messed with, because interest rates are about the time preference theory of credit. End of that conversation. I'll just say there's lots of stuff in Keirsey, Damon, that you should, I think, would appeal to you, because he looks at things on a external level, but also from an internal level in terms of what people want.
Yeah, I actually have that very book, and I've read through it a few times.
Wow, what do you think of it?
I like it. It's interesting, though I don't really still feel like I don't have a grip on Keirsey enough to be able to comment on it. I've read through that one, but it's not that I've studied it. I haven't put the highlights and the notes and put the time into it. It's like I kind of looked at certain things. I was like, okay, how does this person work, vertical and horizontal, and how they organize and those type of things. But it's a different system. And when I work with taxonomies, I want to make sure that the one I'm working with is internally consistent before I start pulling in more data for another one and then I don't like the meshing of it. I want to keep them compartmentalized. And so for me, it's very hard to mesh it. And then we get into this conversation of taxonomies. Which one are you using? It's when I think about like World Socionics Society, there's a very specific taxonomy they use, and it's pretty clearly laid out. And that's the one that I operate in when I'm talking to people of that group. And then I can jump into another group and be, oh, here's the taxonomy for this group. Let's talk MBTI. And that's why I shy away from the 4 letters, because 4 letters can indicate Keirsey, Socionics, or MBTI. And it's just like, I don't know about that. I'm not really huge fan.
These days, especially Sana has sort of pushed me in that direction, that when I do use the 4 letters, I'll go Keirsey ESTP or Keirsey ISO.
I have a question to Damon. At what age did you start separating people into types?
Early 20s.
How did that happen?
I was trying to figure out why I was so messed up in the head.
Okay, I just noticed on the example of some other ESTPs that they usually have some kind of system going on in their head without naming it in any way other than empirical, like a type of this person, a type of that person, and they can kind of compare people to one another.
Well, I have.
By their modus operandi.
I thought you meant like just types like MBTI and that kind of thing. I didn't understand what your question was. So you're asking how early did I start categorizing people in general, right?
Yeah, correct.
Oh, I did that my whole life. From the early days of school, you had the geeks, you had the jocks, you had the nerds, and then you would fit a certain group based on how I thought you were. Like, okay, you're a nerd, you go in that group.
Yeah, my opinion is that SLE is like a born typologist, but they group people by modus operandi, by TE factor.
Yep. I think that's fair. I look at what people's intentions are. I see what they're looking to do in the sense of what they tell or how they act, and then I put them in that particular group.
So there's actually a lot. IEI and SLE have a lot in common, because we like to kind of categorize people because we're NF, and you guys like categorizing people because that's how you think. For some other reason. And also there's another way, another similarity I noticed, that sometimes SLE would treat things very gingerly, well, because they're practical, and we tend to have the same reverence for things, because for us all things are alive whenever we can pay attention. So when I see an SLE kind of moving cabbage heads around, something clicks in my head, because that's how the cabbage has to be properly treated. Because for me it's a live being, and for them, okay, that's how you do things.
I think I understand that metaphor. I think I have a decent understanding of what you're trying to explain there.
All right.
So,
Well, I have to leave, so I hope. Well, I did have a good time, and thank you for all the answers.
oh, thank you.
Thank you, Mama.
Being on.
All right. Bye.
Cabbage heads. That's a category of people I've made before.
Morgan does that. Jeff's son, he judges people by how useful they are. And so he sees the NFs as their only use is making other people useful.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
Boy.
I used to call people pretty useless at times. That person's useless. And then it's like I've grown up a little bit, though. It's like I still have impulses sometimes to categorize people. And then I have become aware that I don't really know the essence of people as somebody that uses the forbidden letters FI would do. And that is the new mystery for me, and why I've centered the whole conversation around those forbidden words, those forbidden letters. But the idea was that it furthers my understanding of, okay, so I can categorize based on either observational data, but I don't trust, say, the fact that somebody might go, okay, well, this person's this. Okay, I hear what you're saying, but okay, let me see what this person's about. Let's see how useful they actually are.
I think Morgan has said that because he said he learned typology from 6 years old, but the truth was from 8 from his father Jeff, and he would say that nearly all the types that he comes across when he was at school he would call them the scrub versions of the types. They would never see the people up to the level of the types that are actually described in the Keirsey books, because he was just describing the sort of the highest functioning versions of the type.
And like I said, it's really hard because a lot of the models are, hey, this is behavior based. The thing I like about Socionics, it's very input output. And I like that. It's like the way that I view it in my weak metaphorical mind is that you take in information, it's metabolized, and as expected behavior is outputted, laced with your environment and your values and the things that you believe. And so it's like that output is an expected behavior. It's encapsulated with your values and your core beliefs. And that's how I view it. And that makes sense to me. Whereas it's like ESTPs, they all play sports, bro. They're all basketball players. Like, that is the stupidest thing I can think of. And I see that all the time. And that's why I'm like, dude, this is stupid. Like, what? Okay, then, and LIEs are all what? And I see this and I'm like, okay, we can start throwing these into categories. And it just doesn't make sense to me, because people are so adaptable. They can be flexible in certain areas, and you start seeing growth. And I've seen growth in myself, even looking back at my old YouTube videos. And it's like, okay, so I'm not, well, as ESTP then, and I woke up and changed my profile picture and my type changed.
But Socionics people can be just as stereotypical as well. So they'll say, some people will go, Trump, he is SEE because he's from business. He is very gamma. I was like, no. SLE for Trump.
The behavior thing is so questionable because it's laced in values. It's encapsulated. And you can take 20 people from the same culture, because I was born and raised in the hood. I mean, everyone was an SLE in the hood according to behavior. Everybody was confrontational. Everybody. You couldn't look at a person the right way without being confrontational. It was like, and you're telling me that the hood was just full of people who were just SEEs and SLEs and ESIs, and it's silly when we start taking into cultural aspects of these large cultures. You can start seeing the influence it has on these core beliefs, and the behaviors are encapsulated within these beliefs. And that's where it comes into a core of understanding NLP, because NLP is a lot about your core beliefs, how you see things. There's a particular model I use. It's called the identity iceberg, which talks about behavior change. And the only thing we see at the top is the behavior. And then you start digging at skills or beliefs or values or identity. Then you start seeing where all this behavior actually manifests from. And it's not just the way we process cognitive information elements. It's more than that. So I think that's a big player into the arena that we've ignored as a community of typologists.
You know, sorry, I'm a little bit sick, so my voice might sound like crap. To be honest, my best friend is an SLE, and she doesn't believe in socionics for the reason, kind of for the same reasons why you said that you do believe in socionics. So she thinks that the typology system is like you can't put people in boxes like that because there is too many factors which influence your behavior. You can't use the typology system in real life because your cultural background affects your type, and there's too many factors which would affect your type. And when you say okay, this person is an SLE, it ends up meaning nothing because this SLE might be completely different from this other one. So it's kind of interesting to me that you said that.
I think taxonomies are important as long as they're clarified. That's why I asked at the beginning of this call, what do you see FI as? And what do you see these things as? Because as long as they're clarified, we can have a discussion. But if we have different definitions, we can't have a discussion. If we can say the empirical measurement of what this particular, the boundaries of this particular thing are clear, we can have a discussion about it. And we can legit put people into taxonomies. But you have to make the taxonomies clear. But if you're intermingling systems, the taxonomies get muddled, and then all of a sudden it starts blurring the lines. So that's where I love the taxonomies and the boxes that we put people in, because it's very possible, right? It's like you can make, if I say, look, if this person's ethnicity, if we do a DNA test and this person is 90% Caucasian, then that person will now be qualified as Caucasian. If they're 89, they're not. That's a very clear boundary. And that's a taxonomy in which we can discuss, right? And that's just a made up hypothetical example. But it's like, you can discuss that. For the sake of this discussion, that's the taxonomy we're using. Does that mean it's universal? Not necessarily. And
sorry.
Go ahead.
I think this is a very beta way of looking at it. I see not just with typology, but with various different areas in life, people that I have identified as beta STs tend to have this kind of attitude. And I definitely have that attitude. I mean, Ben can tell you that. So I think it's interesting that it comes up.
It's the same to me. By the way, does it still make the super bad noise when I'm not talking?
No, it doesn't. It's fine.
Okay, awesome. Because it's super annoying to keep, putting that on and off constantly.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. No, but yeah, I agree with that. I'm super kind of annoying when it comes to definitions overall. I can't have conversations where definitions aren't like very clear, and that is one reason why like back in the day I left MBTI. It always annoyed me how it's like, yes, NI is magic, NE is I don't know what NE is, SE is being a bully, that sort of thing. It just, yeah.
Well, yeah. That's the very thing that I was addressing on my channel toward the end of it, is that we have to make an effort to understand that, look, okay, if we're going to have a discussion, we need to make things clear. Mm-hmm. And otherwise you're talking from your perspective. And I think the biggest error that we've made as typologists, although tempting, is writing type descriptions, mm-hmm. because we write it from a particular lens versus seeing the thing objectively. If 16 different types wrote a type description, it'd probably be 10 times more accurate. And it's like understanding the use of triangulating type descriptions versus just saying, hey, look, I'm going to write a type description. Imagine me writing a type description on an EII.
Yeah.
It would be.
I think you should do that just for fun, because I totally read it.
It just wouldn't work out well.
No. Those are the best ones. I know this ILI guy. And he wrote a description on SEEs, and it's basically a love letter. It's basically like, oh my God, these people are perfect. Then you read this same person writing about SLEs or EIEs, and it basically makes us out to be, villains. It just literally, these people are immoral, stuff like that written in there.
You get that in Victor's profile of, say, the way he describes beta STs, or even in his profile of IEIs, but also Dario Nardi's book, 8 Keys to Self-Leadership, is heavily biased towards his value functions, his gamma functions. And the way and his description of ESFP is a love letter to ESFP.
I think overall what I've noticed when it comes to socionics is that the NTs are the most, they are usually the people who write, stuff about socionics. So you have alpha NTs writing about socionics, and then gamma NTs writing about socionics. So it seems to me there is a pretty good understanding what alphas are like and what gammas are like, but with both deltas and betas, it sort of seems like it's more of a description what betas and deltas seem like to alphas and gammas.
Yeah,
So,
the beta descriptions are terrible online. All of them. I completely mistyped myself because I did not see myself in the beta descriptions in any way. I could not. I thought it was really stupid. I still think it is. So.
I mean, I'm not a cult leader.
You're not?
I wouldn't tell you if I was. No, but I think.
How are you getting any members if you don't tell people?
That's how they do it. You definitely don't tell. No cult leader tells their followers that, hey, by the way, I'm a cult leader. Follow me. Nobody says that.
Well, you're supposed to be charming, and you can just,
Yeah. I mean, I'm pretty charming. Yeah, but.
Or so you say.
I am pretty. Oi! You want to fight?
Oh God, let's have a low SE fight going on.
Okay.
So what we're talking about is inner subjectivity. We're talking about how we're talking about inner subjectivity. We're talking about how you can look at someone's behavior and you can make assumptions about their behavior, but what you're missing is their mindset. And I tricked the entire internet into thinking I'm ENTJ, strictly on behavior, but they don't know that the behavior can be the same, but the thought process and motivations are very different. The reason that I'm doing this, the reason that I'm applying this particular thing is different from the reason that someone else may be doing it.
And that is the core problem with a lot of typology and typing.
I mean, it's really funny because first time I was typed, this was in MBTI though. So I did the official test in school and I was typed as an INTJ. So, but the situation was that, I was in the school setting and I was describing how I am in school. So.
I think tests are another curse.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're terrible.
Tests are problematic to the whole community because what happens is somebody types wrong and then they start writing descriptions and they have a little more power in certain areas and then they can convince others, hey, look, you don't match me. We don't have the same behaviors. You can't be this type. So now this person has an existential crisis. And then this person starts saying that I'm actually this other type. And then they go into this midlife crisis of, hey, look, I don't know what type I am. And I'm so confused. And the reality is that we can't oversimplify it because behaviors, whether you're in the same quadra or not, you can piss each other off.
Oh, I hate half of EIEs. I can't stand them. I hate most LSIs. Have you ever been in the same room with an LSI? I worked with an LSI. So he was basically constantly telling me how to do my job. And I was so freaking pissed at him. If that's duality, it was, I know he is an LSI, but.
Oh, they can be very, very annoying.
You see, but he might be an LSI that's an ISTJ rather than an LSI that's also an ISTP.
Oh.
Because those LSIs can vary a lot.
Yeah, okay. This goes under personal differences, I mean, this is like,
Yeah, because an ISTP kind of LSI wouldn't tell you how to do the job.
Yeah, but can we just agree that, you know, there are a lot of differences between people of the same type. We don't need to necessarily analyze it by using other systems.
Yes,
So,
yes, thank you.
The comment, the anecdote that I want to throw in here is that my girlfriend's observing this live stream, and she thinks that all of you hate me.
Yes, she's totally right.
And she's like, these people hate you.
Yes,
and she thinks that I love that. She thinks that you all think that I love hearing the sound of my own voice.
Yes, you totally do. But that's okay. So do I. So do I. So it's like, I can't blame you for that.
And she's like, wow, I bet you. She's like, you are so obnoxious.
Is she an F5 ego type, Damon?
Yeah.
I don't think that I have the ability to hate anybody.
I dare you. I dare you.
I have.
Oh, wow. I truly don't hate people. Like, I don't feel the hate toward anybody. I don't like actions. It's like I judge actions. Like, I think that what you did was stupid, but I don't go, that is a terrible person. I can't, it's very difficult for me to make judgments like that.
No,
that's also very beta, I think.
No, I think that's SLE. That's SLE.
I do the same. I'm pretty much like that too. I don't necessarily judge the person very easily. I judge what they do, and I will judge them. I will tell them that was dumb.
Well, yeah. What I mean more is that what I see SLEs do is, I guess it's because the FI thing is that they keep going back to really shitty people. So, for example, my best friend, again, SLE, she does this thing that, every single thing about this person tells that they are trouble. But she isn't capable of kind of knowing or like judging that person if they are a good person or not. So it's like somebody is clearly, a drug user and abusive person, and they are like, I don't know if they are a bad person. I haven't seen them do anything bad.
Yeah, but you're just talking about polar FI there.
Yeah, but that's the thing. That's the thing. I think SLE are they don't make character judgments, so they just don't see the.
Yeah, polar FI. But I mean, that's not what I was talking about when I say I don't judge people. I judge people. I don't judge them permanently. I judge them for what they are right now.
Yeah. Okay, well, that I agree with.
So long-term hate is difficult because that's a long-term judgment. Yeah. You will keep hating that person even if they change their behavior. And I don't think that's very beta.
Well, I think I can do that if I can see that because I think it ties with NI with me.
Yeah,
so
sure.
if I can see that somebody is going to repeat the behavior indefinitely, I will hate them.
I don't think I hate them. I will just keep thinking they're idiots. I mean, they're behavior-wise.
Now that you guys are talking about it more and I'm thinking about it, you know what? No, actually, I do. When I am done with someone, I am done with them long-term. And this goes back to Shauna, what you're talking about ethics of emotion and FE. Once I have judged this person to have done wrong, it is very, very hard for me to maintain a relationship with this person, and I will distance myself from you. We will not have a relationship anymore. I'm sort of the type where if relationships don't work out, we're never talking again. There's no communication. Even if we leave on amicable terms, like even if it's all right, but we've decided we're not going to see each other anymore, it's over. It's done.
So I got a question for Ben. Did he disappear?
Yes. I'm here.
You mentioned earlier, you said you were like, is she an FI ego type? Yeah. Before I ask you this question, I want to clarify that when she predicted that we would all go into defining what hate actually is. And sure enough, we kind of went into that direction. So she was right. And I'm publicly announcing that. And she's like, you're all good taking it so seriously. You're all stupid, stuck on your stupid definitions.
Yeah,
So-
I've heard that
but-
before. I know, like, well, you can't have a conversation without defining things.
Well, I mean,
I'm very much about clarity, but Ben, the question is, when you said is she an FI ego type, what was your inference? What came to your head what made you ask that question?
Because you were giving me lots of examples of her doing the projecting and FI stuff.
Okay, I just was wondering what your brain pattern was.
I was picking up on FI, on things that FI ego, FI, especially, is she an FI? Is she a Delta NF?
Yes.
Well, there you go. That's what she was talking like.
Yeah. Well, she is.
Yeah, well, I picked it up.
Yeah. Good job.
Because
I need to ask a noob question.
Go on.
How do I find out about this alpha and beta? Like how do I know this?
Well, in terms of websites, if you go to wikisocion. Is it .net now? Wikisocion.net.
Net, yeah.
And watch the videos on this channel about Socionics, especially the ones with Sana, because she brings up a lot of beta NF stuff.
That was a good plug, Ben.
You mean I insist that you keep defining things? Yes, and not mixing up systems. I definitely do that in every one of them.
But I mean, Chad said something. It says when he said triangulate a type, I think with quite a few of these definitions, they have part of the truth of what something is, but not the whole picture. And that's because in reality, the function is probably in future, you could probably split it into a few different things. And I think that's the case with SE and SI.
So I actually had a chart I created on that. You'd love it because it's a chart, right? So it took aspects of MBTI TE, broke them down into different functions of like socionics.
Yeah.
And I would show like aspects of TE. So MBTI, it glorifies TE. And it's like TE's dominant, it's assertive, it's controlling, it's organizing, it's structural, it's this, it's that. It's a powerhouse in MBTI. And so everybody wanted to be an ENTJ or ESTJ.
So this is SLE saying this.
Yeah, but
hey, we clarified that already. SLE is speaking from the SLE perspective, but there's a lot of people.
I don't think, like, let's say, IEIs would glorify TE even in MBTI.
I don't know, because it is the assertiveness.
Yes.
I mean, I type as INFP and MBTI, and that's partially why.
Yeah, there's a video on that, Raquel. I called it something like Outlier Sana. Why this Socionics IEI types as Briggs.
It's not an outlier, though. It's very common.
Yeah, but you type as INFJ in Keirsey, though. Misdirective.
Yes. Because that's another system again.
Right. But
the whole thing was, though, that we take these aspects and then we try to translate them over when you realize that there's, for example, FI and MBTI is more about morality. And I didn't like that definition of it. And so it's like, it's very much about your own interpersonal morals and also respecting other people's morality.
Yeah, but also, but the way if you ask most Americans what morality is, they'll probably give you something that's a little bit more objective in quotation marks. So for instance, Guardians are very moral, but it's like the social values of their particular subculture. And they will get their morality from outside of themselves. So there's morality and then there's personal ethics. But I will just call it what Jung called it, subjective feeling. It's the subjective aspect.
Yeah, this is where the waters get muddy because, we teach morality in the schools that I've been to and I'm not saying that it's very different. You're right. There's multiple definitions of what morality is. And this is where the confusion comes from. The way that I understand it, my taxonomy of morality is intrapersonal, right? And so it's like, this is between me and me alone. And
subjective feeling
given to you by the collective.
Right. Subjective feeling.
Right. So that's where I like the idea of, you have, subjective feeling and objective feeling. Sure, that makes sense. The problem with the word feeling creates a whole nother definition problem.
Right. The thing is, though, when you start, I don't say that ethics is FI. What I notice in FI, in INF, in FI and X is that their ethical thinking is FI based. Because I noticed this from a time when I used to be very left wing. My thinking was based on my feelings. So, and then when you actually abstractify it into a system, if you asked an INFP or an EII what their morality was, what they would tell you, it would be a whole moral system, and you could say, well, actually, I can see how you use TI based on that principle. You've come up with this theory based on a feeling of fairness, and you've abstractified it into a system which goes across multiple contexts. So you can see that morality is not just one function, but I would say there is a tendency for it to start with a feeling.
Okay. Yeah, and that makes sense. Jack actually had something interesting here in the chat. He said that he doesn't like the term subjective feeling because subjective means something that Jung, or something to Jung that isn't commonly grasped. The more common understanding of subjective aligns to internal, external, and socionics. So all ethics is subjective in lay terms, and so is intuition.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like that word either, because I've seen a lot of people apply the common usage of subjective on, especially TI. They will insist that it's, I mean, it's even impossible to explain why I'm annoyed, because I would have to define all the terms that I'm using. So
people do it in the YouTube channels. They'll call it objective personality, and they just sort of mean it to be, oh, just look at yourself without some emotions and then you're being objective. No, we don't. We're going with the actual philosophical definition of subjective and objective that's in Jung. So, but yeah, I mean, it's like with the word rational. I mean, it means something different in philosophy than it does mean in outside of it, but it's still a good term, because the NTs still pride themselves on being rational, that their decisions are determined by reason. And go on,
I
Raquel.
want to add that Jung in subjectivity is not about erasing emotion. Emotion is what establishes archetypes in the beginning. We have to have some sort of inspiration to begin to consolidate information. He was not about putting the emotion away, but having awareness of how emotion plays a part in thinking, perception, all of that stuff.
Yep. And I'm doing an analysis at the moment, but I'm doing it bit by bit. And so there's a bit of Jung on FI. And again, here it gets to the point of there's FI and then there's FI use. And so this bit here, it becomes falsified by an egocentric attitude. So once an FI Dom is unhealthy, they're going to be crap at processing FI information and putting themselves in another person's shoes, because all of their baggage is going to get in the way. And this is something Annie Linden, who was involved in NLP, she came up with this idea of a fair witness position. Are you using FI in a fair witness position, or are your own feelings and baggage getting in the way of the process? Because it is a process that is so much a part of, say, the NFPs, FI.
Okay, what are we talking about right now? I'm really confused. Why are we talking about FI again?
Because Raquel brought up feeling in Carl Jung. And I was mentioning this bit here about, he's noticing here about how it can go wrong. So if you have an FI Dom who's selfish, they're not going to be very good at reading other people and getting into their head.
Ben.
Oh yes, we were banned. I'm sorry.
You're talking about FI. This is totally off limits. We have to get back onto something that's
do any of us have that? Is that
NI? Let's talk about NI.
Yeah, let's talk about NI for once. Let's talk about something that.
Tell us what you think it is, Damon.
NI.
Yes, please do.
It's the intuition of time. It's the perception of how events will unfold over a period of time, taking all things into consideration, patterns that you can see that unfold over time. It's a perception. It's understanding how time is. That's how I see it. But I also attribute it to understanding the long-term consequences of things, understanding, like I said, patterns, how they unfold. So that would be my basic layman's terms of what NI is.
I think it's accurate.
Yeah.
In terms of, Keirsey would talk about, and this is relevant, the NTJs, they know how to line up the actions in order to achieve a long-term goal, get the sequencing of actions right. And so they're good at mobilizing resources and arranging resources. NFJs, they use that intuition of time, but for them it's more intuition of development, and you're developing with people and their potential. And so ENFJs will tend to go with with more than one person in terms of the development of them. So it's like, so NI with FE rather than NI with TE.
I think that's a fair. I think that makes sense. I do want to avoid the magical element of NI.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that for sure some ENF, like some EIEs do that, but I again dislike it when it sort of goes to that, you know, NFs do this, NFs do that, personally, because I don't think it's that simple. People are different. People do, you know, enjoy different things.
Right.
I think NFs do a lot of things that may look like magic to people that don't value or use the same IMEs, but it doesn't mean that it is. It's just a different level of approach, or a different kind of approach.
So Raquel, now that you've looked at Erickson, and you know with him the unconscious was a big thing, what things in him do you think was like him using NI? Or the way he used the unconscious? Because I think I put unconscious in the realm of NI.
Well, first of all,
I mean, is it really
the dude healed himself from like terminal illness. I mean, if that's not magic, then I don't know what that is. Like awareness of I think the awareness of how things work over time, awareness of payoff, long-term payoff in starting relationships or starting behaviors. How did he use the unconscious?
Well, he had in this book, Teaching Tales, he gives all these stories that work on an unconscious level, and Rosen, a hypnotist, analyzes them in this book.
Okay, so this gives me, what comes to mind is where someone could tell a story, and every time they tell the story, you take something different. So it's sort of like the time in which you deliver the story, where the other person's at, or where when you listen to a story, where you're at you're going to pick up different things about the story. That's sort of what came to mind when you were explaining that.
Yeah, and he also adapted the stories to the person who is with. And NLP, I think downtime has something to do with NLP. Sorry, with NI, the NLP concept of downtime. And I can also see that how the guys that came up with NLP were hot for NI. They were really hot for NI.
I think how we also explore the unconscious part of it is by creating that paradox. Like, one of the things he would say is to get people to talk about things, he would give them permission not to talk about it. So he would say, like, you can disclose only the things you want to disclose. And so what's on your mind is that there are things that I don't want to disclose. So it was sort of like a trickery. Like, we're getting the person to think about the things that they don't want to disclose by telling them, do what you want. You know, you can disclose all the information you want. So it was paradoxical in that way, where we're getting people to think about things without saying, think about this.
Recently, David Mark Keirsey told me that his father went to see Erickson, and that his father could be hypnotized, and that he thought he was a genius. They called him the Wizard of Arizona or the Wizard of Phoenix, I think.
I think that there's a lot of bias around NI in the whole typology community. For me, it's just like you can see how things pan out based on your accumulation of patternized data, and that it's like I think that's where it is. Your attention is not on the concrete, but it's on the abstract. So you're taking in information and looking at patterns more than you are looking at reality, and as a result, you can see how things unfold over time. I don't think there's a super subconscious magical element to it that the stereotypes have often produced. It can seem like that, but I don't think that's the case. I think that any NF type in general is really good at reading people, period. I don't think that it has to do with like NI is what can pierce your soul and NE can't. I think that NE can get to the same conclusion as NI in a different manner of speaking, but it uses both.
Yeah, also, Keirsey really demystified it in personality by calling it intuition induction.
Yeah.
But the thing of NS will like take a little thing and extrapolate from it. Now, of course, if they have more data and they've got that pattern, then they can have a keener insight into the person. But I would say that.
Guys.
Go on, Raquel. You've been very good, and you even showed us
good
your
conversation. Oh, yeah, that's right. Good conversation. Invite me on the next one.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Ben, I'll probably take off in about 15 minutes too.
Okay.
So.
I think how I might see NI is that it's knowing the essence of something. So basically the idea is that you stare at the specific thing long enough to know how it works. And when you know how it works, you know, you can tell what it's going to do next. And that's why, you know, SLEs and SEEs are kind of bad at NI. They don't take the time to, you know, observe the thing long enough to know its essence.
Part of the Jungian mechanism of NI is that you've got personal images and you've got collective images. And Jung thought that the collective images, the primordial images, aka the archetypes, were things that were very important on a cultural level in terms of a representation of a universal that was like something that would define the course of events because of this connection with this archetypal thing. And he thought that because the NI DOMs had a connection to their unconscious like this, he thought the mechanism of the prophetic ability of NI was the connection to these primordial images and archetypes in the unconscious. So he's given a mechanism now of how it works. He then talked about how with intuition that somebody can know something and they don't know why they know it. And he thinks that what has happened is an unconscious chain of associations. And then he says, sometimes you can think it through and try and work out backwards what those unconscious chain of associations might be. So he defined intuition as perception by means or ways of the unconscious. But I think that definition particularly applies to NI. So, and I can give some examples of this. So Sana, can you give us some examples of you just knowing stuff and then stuff in terms of the way you use NI? Oh, just give us some examples of how you use NI.
It's more like a constant awareness of trends. Some of the information is going to be things you remember consciously, other things you won't. It's kind of a merging of everything you know consciously and unconsciously. And as an IEI, it kind of just emerges. So it can seem like it's out of nowhere, but I'm well aware that it's largely based on, for example, SE data. It doesn't come out of nowhere. It's not, if my data is incorrect, so is my NI. So I need to constantly be learning. I need to be finding out everything I can about whatever topic I'm focused on, because unless I do that, then my NI conclusions or NI, well, they're not conclusions, but like the trend that my NI tells me is going on is also going to be incorrect. So I can't tell you definite examples as such, because it's an ongoing thing. It's always happening. So is there something specific that you...
okay. Specific examples, say when you're counseling somebody.
When I'm counseling somebody, I pay attention to what they say, what they don't say, how they say it, how they don't say it, what they focus on, what they don't focus on. So it's a combination of what they say and reading between the lines. And as I keep focusing on this, I compare it to my previous experience. I compare it to what I know about myself, and an awareness of everything that has to do with everything. So I start getting an idea of where the person is coming from, where they need to go, and then I can try and help them.
Right.
Did that make any sense?
Yeah, it did. I'm trying to work out how conscious that is.
I know consciously that I'm doing it. I know in the moment what's happening. I'm not always aware of exactly what information led me to a certain idea of what's going on. It happens too fast. I can't consciously keep track of it, because it's just, there's too much.
Because I think what an INTP would do in that situation, if they get the information, they'd analyze the information, and as they was analyzing it, they'd stop listening.
Yeah, I don't. I do call it analyzing, but it's not really analyzing, because I think it's more the way I experience it. I just kind of look into the person.
Right.
And I can't really tell you what that is, because it's a very feeling perception of what's going on. I literally feel like there's this person, and I look into them and I see their pattern, which is composed of multiple different patterns, and then I try to make out exactly what's important.
Yeah. So it's very hard to separate it from the feeling aspect of it.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's I think it's part unconscious SC, part feeling, and then there's the NI kind of being aware of all those things at the same time and seeing how they combine.
I think EII would in making things a little bit more conscious, but they might read into it more and abstractify it. We did a hangout with Crystal. It was about 3 hours, and it was just on how IEI uses FI and how they might differ in counseling. And I thought of sort of maybe speculated that EII might see the connections sooner, but IEI would then know what to do with that information in advising the person.
I don't know what you mean by seeing the connection sooner, because to me it's a very real-time thing as it is. Yeah. Do you mean like they would need to ask less questions? I mean, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, but I also think they can get distracted in the way they make connections, because that's part of the problem with NE is that they might then make a connection and it can sort of lose focus. It's difficult because they listen better than I do.
I think EII and IEI have exactly the same strengths. We can do the exactly the same things. I think we get the same information out of it.
Yeah.
But our way of approaching the person, once we know all this, is different. we do different things with this information. But I mean, I'm going to get all the same NE information that they are, and they will be doing the same thing with the NI. But they want to help people in a different kind of, with a different kind of approach.
I think it's easier for IEI to get themselves into a fair witness position than EII.
I wouldn't even say that, because it's, I mean, that's going to be person dependent. When you help someone, I think we can both do it.
Yeah, but it's like, but I would just think, but if the EII is somebody who is very ethical and has lots of belief, that can get in the way. That is not, it's something Keirsey wrote about the counselor, where it says they're good at dealing with complicated people because they're complicated themselves. Whereas, and so they can see, so they're in, because they're strong with the FI, but they don't value it. Then it's why naturally, I would say that IEI is a better natural counselor than EII. However, EII, if they've got if they're very healthy FI, where they don't get it, where they don't have their own values and beliefs get in the way of dealing with the issue of the person, then they can also be very good. And that relates to the health of the individual. It's something that Carl Jung wrote there about, if the FI is selfish and self-centered, it's not going to work very well at understanding other people.
Yeah, obviously. I just don't think we should draw distinct differences like that. I think both types can be very good counselors, and it depends on what you're looking for in a counselor. Because the EII is going to be a lot better at giving you multiple different options on how to do stuff. Whereas if you come to me, I'm going to tell you what I think is best, and I'm going to be focusing on that. And that's just how I am. So you need to know what you need, what you're looking for. But I don't think it has anything to do with the ability of seeing information or obtaining it. I think we're potentially, both types are just as good at all of it.
Yeah, because the social mission blocks are very similar. You either got NI-FI or FI-NI. Or in Model A terms, they're both 4D, those functions. I agree with what you said about the options for EII, and that's backed up by interaction styles informing, well, you could do this or you could do that.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that. I'm not interested in the less.
Right, and that's why it's not necessarily that good, because the person who's coming to you, they want the answer. Sometimes it depends on the person.
Yeah.
Well, I think we also were missing an important factor here too, because you're talking about EIIs and IEIs, but if we're talking about NE versus NI, IEEs are also very, very good at seeing how NI works and being able to work with it. Of course, they don't value it, but it's still strong. Like my girlfriend, she's not going to give like a bunch of multiple options. She does like to explore, and she dives deep into topics, but she's not going to, you could do this and do that. She tells you what she thinks, and she positions it in a way that's so coded with FE. It's nice because it's like, look, she's being stern about what she believes, but she says it in a way that it's well received. But it's not this exploratory, oh yeah, well, you could do this, you could do that, you could do this. She's way more confident in her opinions than it's stereotypically suggested by people who value NE.
I think that's very typical of NE leads, actually.
Yeah, and if what I'm trying to get to is if the argument is about the functions, we're looking in the wrong place. Because
ILE is more likely to do what you described there, in terms of, because they're not going to have a firm, well, you could do this or do that or that or that.
No, in my experience, NE leads have such, it's kind of like a mastery over their NE that they come across as much less scattered than the stereotype suggests, because it's just something they do, and they know what they should be focused on, even if they like to explore. I observed this in other people as well.
In all honesty, I think people with demonstrative NE, like myself, we have way worse issues with being scattered.
Do you?
I can imagine LIE being all over the place with we could do that, we could do this, because I've seen it with LIE tech supports a lot. They get carried away with all the possibilities.
Really?
Because also they are vertical.
Yeah. So the form of cognition, vertical synergetic, it's an supervision ring with of the was it left spinning positivists? Yeah.
I think it's like talking about probing people, though. That's the thing. Is like, my girlfriend IEE, she's very open to exploring possibilities in her life, but when she gets in that, like, I'm going to help this relationship, she turns on that, like, I'm focused and I am going to help you.
Right.
And then she comes right back out and she's like, oh, I don't know what to do today. You know, it's like, it's like it just kind of lets go after that. But she gets really focused, and so I think what's been said is that if you have that, you know, that ideas in your first program function, you have a lot more control over it. Whereas I find that LIIs or EIIs tend to want to just keep throwing. I find that, but I don't want to categorize behavior. What I have found in my own experience, and because I'm not saying that any in the second is more here, it's all over the place. But I have found in my experience that to be the case, but I am not going to say that in full.
But you gave an example there where somebody was moving into a role of the diplomatic intellect. So it's like they're going into that role, and that role demands these certain things where the NE becomes disciplined to that role. So you're in the role of counseling somebody, or the role of reconciling alienates.
I think what is going on here is shifting. IEE can shift into a mediator as a semi-dual shift. And that's also, it requires some focus, because you just do this one thing and you're not exploring your NE that much.
Yes, so that's from a Socionics point of view, they go to the mediator. So Maria means SEI from that point of view, because Victor calls the SEI the mediator. But also in Keirsey, the NFP is, when they're doing their diplomatic intellect, there is a tendency for them to mediate between people. And so when they're focused in that role of helping, but they're not going to be NEing all over the place, because their focus is on the other person in their role as catalyst and helping them. And also, because they're NFs, they tend to do the other things as well. So these other things to do with the diplomatic intellect, mentoring and mediating, I suppose those things take over and discipline the NE.
Yeah, I can't speak on her behalf. I just know what I've observed.
Yeah, it seems to fit that.
Yeah, I don't know what actually happens cognitively with her, considering that we're super ego types. It's like very hard to understand how she processes that information. I just see the result of it, and she's very good at it. And that's what I can speak for, and I can attest to that. So
yeah, it fits with the roles.
Yeah.
So it's just that's one of the things you get with Keirsey. It's like, it's how somebody enacts that intelligent role. And we all enact different roles, moment to moment. And based on experience, you've enacted the similar role. So right. We have.
Well, I strongly believe in the potential of shifts to help developing the personality. So one from his or her shifts.
Maria, could you say, I think you said before how it came from the houses in that you see a strong connection between the houses in astrology and shifts?
This paradigm of shifts in Socionics is just kind of being developed, but it's very similar to houses in astrology, and you can kind of draw understanding from that theory. Because in astrology they say that opposite houses should balance one another. People should draw on the energy of some shift, which is like whose energy and skill is missing in your current situation. Like when you have certain qualities under the like 5th house, and to be balanced, you need to kind of learn from the way you are in the 11th house, which is the opposite.
So, NI?
So basically, back to Socionics, we can, for instance, SLE can be very FI conscious when in a group mode, when they're working as a team. And they can kind of learn from how they have been in that particular mode to understand more about their other sides of their life.
So
Maria, but
I'm sorry if I'm making myself clear. It's
no, that's
for
okay.
me. It's more of a luck.
Maria, you have a lot of typological knowledge. Do you think that there is anything missing in Socionics' definition of NI? Would there be? Is there something to it that you would like to add to the definition of NI?
Well, there are so many definitions. I think everybody kind of has his own definition.
What's your definition?
What exactly are you talking about?
Well, I'd just like to know how you define NI based on your experience of these different schools of Socionics, what you personally think NI is.
Well, first of all, it's kind of hard to give definitions considering there are 4 different levels of functioning.
Okay, and the basic.
Kind of have to you have to no, they're not basic or more sophisticated. They are just different, like social level, like psychological, physiological, and stuff.
Could you do it for those 4 levels?
On the physiological level, it's what you call sense of time.
Right.
On a social level, it's more like being adequate to like where you happen to be fitting in, or lack of it, maybe, the awkwardness and being round peg in a square hole and whatnot.
Is that related to Victor's temperament of receptive adaptive, that fitting in thing?
So basically, it's going with the flow and not causing singular.
Right.
Harmony.
Yeah. Right.
So psychologically, it may be this, whole archetype thing. Right. You see, it's a lot of different things.
Could you give some examples of how you use NI?
Well, what Dr. G likes to mean by intuition of time is how I, for instance, I can tell pretty much with a 5 or 10 minutes error what time it is right now. Ooh. Even if last time I looked at the clock was 3 or 4 hours ago. So it's kind of helpful when you need to do a lot of things which are time related or scheduled. You need to. I rarely use timer, or I don't look at the phone or clock as often because I usually know what time it is.
Right.
It also gives you some sort of quick quick response. I noticed, well, compared to my rational friends, I usually react to things a lot faster. So I don't always use safety features because I'm usually quick to catch stuff.
It's interesting what you said there about time, because Jonathan has talked about being bad with keeping appointments and things and having to be reminded.
Well, appointments is just, it also requires being aware of stuff. Like sometimes you just avoid looking at the calendar because that may be how how our extroverted intuition may work. We may avoid being aware of stuff.
Yeah, Jonathan's mentioned that about, even if he has sticky notes everywhere, he just won't see them.
It's just that sometimes we have that aversion to being aware of stuff.
Right, so this is that NLP concept that I think is related to NI. That's being the downtime, where the focus is internal rather than external. ESTP being one of the best types at uptime, being completely immersed in the senses. What we're going on here?
There's also an interesting thing about time, that is when you deal with like indigenous populations, they don't like clocks or calendars, but they know when it's the right time to do stuff, and it may be completely different from our rational idea of time. But they may think in terms of when things are ripe for doing certain things. And that is a major NI thing.
Right.
We even, like, I'm talking about NI type, NI DOMs here. We have this NI language. We express things in terms of timeliness and readiness. Like in Avatar, the Neytiri, which is an NI DOM, she keeps saying like, now you're ready. And generally she talks in terms of being ready.
Yeah, I think that NI has a lot to do with being aware of timing, correct timing.
Yeah, but SI DOMs have the same thing about comfort. Like they would say, I'm not comfortable doing this. And there may be a bunch of reasons, and they might have said it in a different way, but they will say, I'm not comfortable doing this. And I would say, I'm not ready to do this. Like I remember talking with my boss, and he was kind of disappointed by my response, I'm not ready to talk about this. But then I saw his reaction, like how his face fell, and I rephrased it. I said, okay, I know how to put it. This is not your business. And he said, yay!
Right.
Because he himself has control NI, and it kind of rubbed him the wrong way, what I was saying.
Do you think you rephrase, Maria, do you think the E9 IEIs will rephrase things more than, say, other Enneagram types of IEI?
Come again?
Well, it's sort of you like rephrasing things to accommodate other people.
Well, I just wanted to be understood.
Right, right. Yeah, and also because you're type aware, you'll know how to reframe it.
But I do like to phrase things in the least offensive way.
Yeah, good. Right. Sana, are there any good questions in the chat?
I think you should have a look at the chat. Or
Yeah, I'm looking through it now, but it's rather a lot in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of crappy stuff in there going on there. So.
Oh, I hope you feel judged there, people, if you're guilty of crappy stuff.
Oh, I would say that although I do like to phrase things least offensively, but sometimes I like to hide that tack in what I'm saying. So it kind of looks inoffensive, but then you sit on that tack and you feel it.
Right. Ah. I see. One of the things Chad was saying about his significant other is the way they're saying there about not using as much NE. I understand the NFPs in sort of two ways, the two main ways. Either they're in EP mode or NF mode. And when they're in the NF mode, they're likely to be, like I said, the NE gets disciplined to the needs of the person and the sort of the role that they are roughly enacting in that moment, whether it is counseling or mediating, or sorry, mentoring or mediating.
Yeah, that's where I'm not comfortable with Keirsey, because I can see, I can compare NF and ST, but not NF and SP. And it's kind of intuitive for me. What comes from my experience and my intuitions kind of usually works for me, and that's why I don't necessarily adopt. I cannot necessarily adopt any system even if it has some nuggets that I like.
Well, one of the contrasts we made was when we were talking with Shannon and Imogen and comparing them and to INFPs, and how for both of those as ISFP resemblers, there were a little bit more of an emphasis on freedom than for the EII. And in terms of not just freedom for themselves, but also freedom for other people's actions. And if people see the Hangout, it's put a lot better than the way I've just put it now. And I think I'll put the Hangout.
Well, I gotta, but Ben, you got a person in the chat you probably need to address.
Well, what's the name of this person? Because I may have blocked them already.
They're still visible, so.
Okay, they might be visible to you, but they might not be visible to me if I've already blocked them.
Well, everybody else is seeing them, so I don't know. I think.
Right, okay, well, I'll go through it later. And,
I got you, but I just want to let you wear. But yeah, I got to get going. But thanks for having me on.
Right. Yep.
Okay, perfect. We'll catch you all soon. Thanks, everybody.
See you.
Right. Thanks, Anna.
Bye.
Bye.
I'll just say one of the things Chad was saying about TE and the way they talk about in MBTI and taking charge. What they've done is they've confused TE with TE DOMs, because TE DOMs are in charge. They're initiators. They've confused the function with the person that has it in the lead position. It's just like MBTI, and Sally would agree with this, that they've put, and Jack has made this point, I'll give him credit for that, that the MBTI definition of FE has too much SI put into it.
It has a lot of weird stuff going on. It also has a lot of Socionics FI in it. So,
but we all need to realize, though, that these functions are not things that actually exist, and so there's always going to be debate.
I agree.
That's why I sometimes, when I get tired of it, I'll just switch to Keirsey mode and go a little bit more scientific.
Yeah, and that's why I just simply don't talk about MBTI, and that's it. Like if
I need to make sure to preface every time I use the MBTI code that really I mean in Keirsey. I mean a Keirsey ISFP or Keirsey ESTP. Because one of the things you'll get with MBTI profiles is they are politically correct. Because people are getting these results in a context, and they don't want the negative things mentioned in the profiles. Whereas Keirsey was pretty much retired by the time he wrote his profile, so he will put stuff in there, the negatives of the types. We're winding down. We appear to be running out of steam, don't we, Sana? Are there any myths? So I asked Chad at the start. So what myths are there about betas that you come across that you would like to dispel right now as a sort of closing statement?
Don't believe any of the beta Quadra descriptions that you read, because they all suck.
Right.
I think what Damon said in the beginning is that SE isn't just about applying as much force as you possibly can. It's also about not applying force. It's the understanding of how much force you need to apply in a specific situation.
And do you understand?
Well, I understand. There was a term that I struggled to translate in my head, meaning that management function is, first of all, a receiving function. It doesn't create as much as it processes. And so the management SE is not as much about applying force as about weighing all the forces against one another.
Yeah, but I'm talking about beta Quadra values in general and how it's viewed by other Quadras. Because people think that beta is all about,
well,
just as much force as possible, and then, as much FE as possible, and it's just weird.
I probably missed the part when the SE was defined, because I do since I didn't get to talk about what my definition of SE was, and it's also works on many levels, and it may be like attention, responsibility, basically getting stuff done itself, like sense of achievement, and also there are a lot of different things. But it's like physically, it's about the static pressure.
Right.
But when people who have this function in a non-valued position start talking about it, it becomes like what FI is for me, like that, dreaded subjectivity. So for somebody, SE is the dreaded, brute force.
Yeah.
But so it would be better to kind of give a proper description of what SE actually is from our valued standpoint.
I think Dario gets to a good point here so this is from and it's the function he talks about first, because he bloody loves extroverted sensing. So as we see here, he talks about when the function is used at its most sophisticated. At some point, they're ready to engage the process in its most mature form, pulling off results and spurring action from others simply by making their presence felt. So again, that's what Damon was saying there. It's not somebody who's actively throwing their weight around, but they can have their presence and have their effect on people to expedite things, to move things along. So is there anything wrong with what you see there, Maria?
No, it's just also one of the faces of the function.
Yeah.
And I like, in particular, like the social side of SE is that, you're basically, you feel like you're being seen and noticed.
Yes, that's what I was saying before about yesterday, about presence, attention.
I remember when my son was basically a baby, he was several months old, I could see, like when I was shopping with him in the supermarket, he got a lot of smiles, not just because he was a cute baby, but because he saw everybody around him and gave everybody a personalized smile.
Right then. I'm just going to find it in here.
Something that was so strange for me that I even that I cared to notice how he was different.
Right. So this book has got extremely high reviews on Amazon, The Charisma Myth. And so she's got 4 kinds of charisma here. Authority based on confidence, visionary based on belief, focus based on presence and paying attention, and kindness based on caring. The 4 charismatic behaviors. So it is an extremely highly valued, rated book on Amazon, this one. And as you can tell from the way I behave, I've not read it yet. All right. All right. Right. Just things like, anyway, so yes, attention. I think we're winding down at the moment. So these are some of the reviews of it.
Ben, do you mind if I interrupt for a second?
Go on.
I recalled something when Dr. G was talking about emotions of he brought up contempt as the emotion of SE. And it's also like a non-valued way of approaching this, because contempt is just like a shadow of kind of weighing importance of certain things against one another. When you feel contempt towards something, it means that this is like you are too important to pay attention to this. But there's a lot of things in between. And basically, what also makes up morals of SE types is that particular sense of being too large to pay attention to petty stuff. This is not important enough to pay attention. Therefore, we're not going to hold the grudge, for instance, because this is just too small.
So I will say that
there's a word magnanimous which refers to this thing.
Yeah, something that Nietzsche wrote about somebody who can be magnanimous, and it's not out of compassion. It's just developing that magnanimous side. So from the point of view of LII and EII, their view of extroverted sensing is like this. They see it as like this guy. Now, this guy is a particularly unhealthy ESTP resembler, but this is how we see it, where it's complete expediency and situational tactics, where, so you've got it in here where this is the thought process. And so what happened in this situation in this Twilight Zone episode is you've got 3 guys on this deserted place, and the ESTP guy is thinking, why are you giving water to that guy who's dying? Why are you wasting my water on him? And it just comes to the conclusion to kill the other 2 because that's the best way that he can survive. Now that is perfectly logical, and that is their thought process, and this is how we see it in its extreme, is the thought process of ESTP.
Oh, well, I'm sorry again for interrupting, but I just wanted to finish my train of thought. And remember how we talked about conflictors acting in similar, like both ESTP and EII are likely to forgive their enemy or somebody who did them wrong, treated them wrong. But they do it for completely different reasons. EII may do it out of compassion or whatnot, because, I mean, I don't really know how their mind works, but apparently, let's believe it's out of compassion. But ESTP doesn't really have the kind of empathy that EII have, but they can feel like this is too small to hold grudge
Yeah.
for. So they will also forgive a lot of people because it's just too minor. They're too big for this.
Yeah, they get over stuff easy. There's a woman talking about temperaments on YouTube, and she's very funny, or quite funny. And she gives an example of Brett Favre as an ESTP quarterback, and they'll just lose the game, and everybody else is pissed off that they've lost and he's made a mistake. It's like, hey, it's over. We moved on to the next. They get over stuff quickly. The ability to move on.
Yeah, and they also one thing about ESTP that you notice immediately, they value their time.
Yes. So Dario gave the example. Advice for people, when you're talking to an ESTP, you need to tell them up front what the purpose of the interaction is. And if they think it's a good idea, then they'll listen. So tell them what the purpose of the interaction is, why they should listen to you. And then, because they're very pragmatic. And then also, if you tell them what the purpose of the conversation is, they'll then probably get you, if you then digress, they'll probably get you back onto the point of the conversation. So that was some advice from Dario about ESTPs. And he said that they always are listening, even when they wish that they could switch off their listening. There's always a small listening window open. Right then. But I think this little speech here encapsulates. I mean, a lot of people. I think the ESTP resemblers they would admit this, but there's lots of other people who would take this same approach. But in general society, they're not going to go this far because it doesn't require this result. But yeah. So.
Yeah. One more thing to say about data is that I think in they used to kind of, we always stay close to the tools of influencing the world, because we really want some good changes to happen, and we want it on a large scale. So we try to stay close to the art channel of influence and to like education or press.
Yeah.
It's like Lenin taking the like telegraph and post offices and so on.
So one of the
during the revolution.
Yeah, one of the thought processes you could look at with an ESTP is the thought process of Zhukov, Georgy Zhukov, Marshal Georgy Zhukov, and how he did actually say to commanders, look, you're just wasting lives through having these bad tactics. Don't take on a fortified position. So you could actually show that he cared about that. But there were also those times, though, when he needed an objective to be taken. He seemed to not care as much about the loss of life. So Georgy Zhukov and the books that people have written about him would be a good example, maybe, of the thought process of SLE. And the Socionics people did nickname SLE as Zhukov. So Maria, do you think Zhukov's a good example of SLE?
Well, as for Zhukov himself, I don't know much about his biography, but he kind of looks like one, and that general role, like in humanitarian socionics, the type itself is called the marshal.
Yeah.
So it's a good placement for one.
His book is actually called, in English, because Tick History, the book is called Marshal of Victory, his biography. Now, apparently, Brezhnev insisted that Zhukov write into his novel a fictitious bit where he discussed with Brezhnev some tactics during World War II. So apparently Brezhnev insisted on that bit be inserted into his biography. That bit of propaganda about him.
Anyway, there is something even when you see young children SLE, there is something vaguely military about them. But a friend of mine who has an SLE daughter who is like 3 years old said that strangers would comment about her. She said something like "look of death," but I understand that she has assassin face like eye expression,
Right.
like this person is watching you and this is not for good.
Right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show people a couple of healthier SLE examples.
And there's also a funny thing about SLE kids, just like ILE kids. They have that creative TE working all the time. They tend to pick up stuff that doesn't, like in their mind, is wrongly placed and not working well. Like something that is sitting without much purpose, and they just hold on to it, and sometimes they will live with other people's stuff because that stuff was just not properly used.
Right. What I'm going to do...
And I have to explain to their parents that they shouldn't be really ashamed of this. This is just the practical thinking at work. They just need some rules, and they need to learn that if they want, other people's stuff, there should be some. They have to trade or ask or anything, not just pick up what is not sitting well.
Yeah.
But by itself, it's not a bad thing. They're just being practical and kind of frugal.
That's weird. I was just, I'm trying to show something on screen. Let me go back to here. Let's see if it works. There it is. Hopefully this should send. It's not showing up on screen. And what I wanted to show was, so if you go to Wikipedia, folks, and type in Karla Thrace, you're an example of a female ESTP character in Battlestar Galactica. Right, what have we got here? Right, here we go. Described by a critic as one of television's most complex, ever-evolving characters, the role of Starbuck changed over the run of the series. According to Sakov, Starbuck originally didn't value her own life, inspired her readiness to die for her shipmates. By the end of the series, however, she is prepared to sacrifice herself for others because of her respect for all life. But she's very ESTP through the whole series, and she does this thing about Leoben, who's very IEI, almost stereotypical. In fact, further than the stereotype, because he'll be talking about rivers and streams and Karla Thrace's destiny and all things like that. And there is a weird kind of duality relationship between Leoben and Karla Thrace.
Yeah. I haven't seen this one, but my favorite movies SLE would be the one from True Grit, the girl.
Yeah.
It's kind of a young girl, but she has those very powerful and practical qualities, and it seems like her mother, who is who she is trying to kind of protect and do things for, but who also kind of influenced her morally in many ways. She may be her dual.
Yeah.
Anyway, I had a question to Sana. If all the descriptions online are no good, where should one go for beta quadra to get an idea what beta quadra is like?
That's a very good question because I haven't found one. I don't. That's kind of part of the reason I wanted to have this hangout, because I thought we could try and define it better.
Yeah, I usually like my favorite school of typology is Dr. G's school, School of Humanitarian Socionics, but they also kind of it's more, their descriptions are more sophisticated, but they're still a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know if I've seen his descriptions
malignant.
of Quadras.
Yeah.
I probably haven't.
Yeah, but you got to remember that where Victor is and his type, he lends a certain color to his description of extroverted sensing types.
I have noticed that he tends to play down SE as well, which is interesting because on the other hand, it's often played up. So there's some kind of a balance that's missing. I think it just comes down to people not understanding what it is in Socionics.
He plays it down in LSI and ESI.
It does, yeah. And then, yeah, it's there for the SE leads. But as I said, I don't know how he defines the Quadra leads at all.
Also, there is some confusion about, like, I would say I tend to see it differently whether physical like appearances are found with SI or with SE. In my book, it's with SE. In Dr. G's book, it's with SI. So I think ESI and LSI have demonstrative SE, and that's why they often are kind of obsessed with their look.
With their look? They pay a lot of attention to the way they look because in their mind, they are kind of doing a social service by the way they look. They're always very... I haven't noticed that, but I also don't know very many of those types. So
we're talking about SI DOMs. Yes, SI DOMs can be very aware.
No, I think she was talking about ESI
I'm talking
and LSI.
about ESI and LSI.
Oh, right.
The inspector and the
guardian. Yeah, I noticed that as well. So Shannon's very aware.
Usually the ones who, buy the expensive wardrobes and try to always look their best. They pay a lot of attention to style.
Yeah, I haven't seen this, but I don't know. I'll have to pay attention.
Even if it's a 5-year-old boy, there will be a lot of fuss about what they want to wear and what they don't want to wear. And I have a 5-year-old LSI son who always wants to look cool, and he insists of having certain kind of clothes. And I wasn't surprised by it because I've seen it with many LSI and ESI. They are very selective about their clothes. Nice. And because their look is their public service. They don't do it for themselves, they do it for the society.
Okay.
But also demonstrative function is our core, basically. So they have that core sense of looking together. They have like an innate sense of beauty. Maybe just the noticeable look, the way to stand out. I don't know because it's, I don't know how to explain it so you guys could understand, because it's not what many people imply by SE, but again, from my experience, it's a very valid side of SE. And any function is usually more powerful when it's in a demonstrative position for the personal use, when the person is by themselves.
Right.
Did I confuse you altogether?
No, I just don't have I don't have personal experience on this to be able to confirm or deny what you're saying. Let's put it that way. I don't know. So
well, in ESI case, it's not just their own look. It's the way everything looks, like the whole elegance thing, like Martha Stewart thing.
okay. Yeah, I don't know any ESIs personally that I have confirmed as ESI. So, and I only know one LSI, so I'm just gonna have to keep gathering information and see if that's true.
Right.
Well, anyway, that was my experience of them. They that's why they kind of, if they're like career people, they may sometimes ignore that side and focus on other sides of SE, not less on the physical side and more on like an information side of SE, or generally like other ways of being noticed and accomplished. But this is one of the, like in general, it's a valuable side.
The LSI I know is very, very SE, and it's like an introverted version of SLE. So it's very pronounced in every way that is stereotypically thought of. But he's also very good at SI, so.
Right. Here we go. We've got the Oban here. I don't want to go down too much because I don't want any spoilers in the series, but this guy's very NI in there. Just an example of Leoban. Yeah, Leoban, number 2 in BSG.
Uh-huh.
I don't want to show too much because it's a very good series and I don't want to give away all the twists. And the mayor,
Okay.
and I just realized.
Okay, guys. I hope we had a good conversation. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I think I'll stop it now. It's been very good. So, any final words, Sana?
Nope.
Okay. No, we'll do it.
All right.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
You guys have a good day.
Bye.